Chapter 294. The place Zhen Xingming mentioned was close to the main wedding venue, but it was in a different direction from where Silin had landed. Moreover, he had run into a bunch of street racers on the way there, so it took him a while to get there. It was a place the Rawl family had built specifically for youngsters to have fun and socialize. Even before he landed, he could tell that the place was bustling with activity from above. More than half of the children of nobles who had come to this planet to attend the wedding were gathered here. Some of them were in groups of 2 or 3, and some were in groups. They were all chatting with people they were familiar with and looking for a chance to build a relationship with someone of a higher rank. Silin parked his flying car at the designated spot. The parking lot was filled with dazzling luxury cars, and most of them had the whirlwind emblem on them. Any car with this emblem represented luxury, and people used it to show off their status. Linani and Libero were obviously familiar with the whirlwind. Linani's father's personal car was a whirlwind, but she herself had one as well. It wasn't a custom-made version, and one had to make a reservation long in advance to get a custom-made car unless they provided a design. Otherwise, they had to wait in line obediently. Of course, the Sizer family would definitely show you some respect and make a custom car in advance if your background was strong enough. Linani could still be proud of herself back at the 23rd star region, but she didn't have the courage to do so in the entire empire. Linani's confidence faltered the moment she saw these luxury cars. She knew how the nobles handled things all too well. Libero opened his mouth as he watched Silin calmly park the rental car in an empty spot surrounded by shiny luxury cars. In the end, he didn't say anything. He wouldn't have been able to stay as calm as Silin if he were in Silin's place, and he wouldn't have parked his rental car here. He would have taken it to another public rental spot a little further away. That was why Libero felt a little hot on his cheeks when he saw Silin's reaction. He looked around guiltily, but thankfully, most of the services here were automated and no one was looking. After he parked the car, Silin grabbed the restless gray cat by the neck and called out to the obviously nervous Linani and Libero. Then, they headed towards the place Zhen Xingming mentioned. Linani followed closely behind Silin. She was afraid that he would leave her behind. As for Libero, he saw a couple of people he knew, but he chose to ignore their disdainful and provocative gazes. It wasn't like they dared to act too presumptuously in this place. It was an internal rule, and everyone had to do their best to show off their manners and poise in a gathering place like this. Even if they had personal grudges, they would put them aside for the time being. Firstly, they were not the main characters of this incident. Secondly, they did not dare to take the lead. After all, there were people with higher statuses than them here. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, everyone would choose to give way and focus on the few people with the highest statuses. If anyone made too much of a ruckus, they would be seen as stealing the limelight from those few people. This was a hidden rule. Luna. Linani was following behind Silin nervously and didn't pay much attention to the people around her. She turned around when she suddenly heard a familiar voice. Luna was her nickname. Only people who were close to her would call her that. The person who was calling her right now wasn't someone she knew, but to show that they had a lot of connections here, everyone liked to call each other by their nicknames when they saw someone they knew. Of course, this was only limited to people who weren't higher in status than them. They would never dare call someone of higher status like this. The girl who walked over with a puffy skirt came from a middle-class noble family just like Linani's family. However, unlike Linani, this girl knew a lot of people in the noble circle and liked to make friends with them. Nice to meet you, Sister Vela. Linani pulled her skirt up and gave a noble greeting. Vela didn't pay too much attention to Linani. Instead, she examined Silin and Libero from head to toe. Libero was wearing the Lore family's emblem, but Silin wasn't. She hadn't met them before, but she wouldn't underestimate them since she had spent most of her life among the upper-class nobles. She smiled at Silin and Libero as a greeting, and both of them returned the greeting as well. She was used to judging a person's status and self-restraint through their standard and proficiency in their greeting. Both Silin and Libero's greeting looked casual and natural, but it wasn't a deliberate imitation at all. This caused Vera's opinion of them to rise a little higher. But she didn't know them, and she believed that she had met every single person of status in the upper nobility before. Therefore, even if she thought highly of them, she wouldn't pay them any mind. Luna, why didn't you tell me you were coming? You're not a good friend. Vela pretended to be angry. I'm really sorry. I was with my father and didn't plan on coming, so I didn't want to trouble you. Lunani felt like her face was a little stiff from the smile, but she still maintained a flawless appearance. After all, this was a necessary skill for a noble. If that's the case, I forgive you. Let me tell you, Luna, I've made a lot of new friends in the past 2 days. Come, I'll introduce you to them. Vela liked to show off her superiority, and Lunani knew this very well. It would be good to know more nobles, but Lunani didn't feel safe in an unfamiliar environment like this. Little Luna didn't dare to make decisions carelessly because she was familiar with the dirty facade of nobles. Compared to Vela, Lunani trusted Sillin more, so she turned down Vela's invitation politely. All right then. This is a great opportunity. Don't regret it if you miss it. Vela didn't waste any more time since Lunani had turned her down. She quickly excused herself and walked into another group to socialize. You humans are so real. Hui Mao lay on Sillin's shoulder and said. Sillin pulled Hui Mao's whiskers softly. So don't be like humans. Since the three of them were unfamiliar faces and their emblems weren't very attractive, no one came over to talk to them. Sillin was happy to have some free time, so he went straight to the venue Zhen Xingming mentioned. He thought it was a public venue, but who would have thought that there would be someone stopping him at the entrance to check his identity? Usually, it's a robot that checks people's identity here. If there aren't any service robots drinking tea, then it should be a public venue. There shouldn't be anyone stopping you, Libero explained. He knew how the Lore family set up the venue, which was why he pointed out that there shouldn't be anyone guarding this place. The so-called identity check was just a look at the emblem on the clothes. Everyone guarding this place had a list in their head, and they had memorized the emblems of the nobles who were qualified to enter. If the person's emblem wasn't on the list, then sorry, but please leave. Of Sillin's group, Libero was the only one who was qualified to enter. Sillin and Lunani weren't. It looks like the bar is pretty high. Sillin smiled. Then, should we leave first, big brother Sillin? Lunani asked. That's right, Sillin, we don't care. Libero pulled Sillin and tried to leave. Stopping Libero, Sillin turned on his communicator and was about to summon Zhen Xingming when he suddenly sensed something and looked in a certain direction. Who did you see? Libero followed Sillin's line of sight and didn't see anyone out of the ordinary. However, there were a lot of people coming and going in that direction, and the clothes they were wearing were dazzling. Hui Mao also turned around and looked in that direction. His beard trembled, but he didn't say anything. It's nothing. Sillin turned around and was about to contact Zhen Xingming when a voice suddenly came from the other side of the communicator. Your Highness Sillin. Your Highness. Libero and Lunani stared at Sillin in shock. Only the Emperor and the three kings were qualified to use the suffix, Your Highness, in their titles. Then what was Sillin? A person ran out hurriedly after the voice. It was one of Zhen Xingming's bodyguards. Only someone who understood Sillin's role in the Zhen family would address Sillin as such. Because of Zhenya, the current and former King Fuji's tacit approval allowed this title to spread in the Zhen family. Zhenya was happy to see this happen and didn't object to it. He would always watch the conflicted look on Sillin's face every time he heard this title. Your Highness Sillin, His Third Highness is already waiting inside. The person guarding the door hurriedly apologized and moved aside to let Sillin and the others in. Let's go. Sillin patted Lunani and Libero's shoulders and said, let's go. Oh. The two of them followed Sillin with stiff steps. They were also wondering how they had become His Highness Sillin. Sillin saw Olagannuo come out to relieve himself after they turned a corner in the corridor. Sillin called out, Gaga. Libero's face twitched. He knew Uliganuo. He had seen him during the test. But after Libero learned more about Uliganuo, he realized that anyone who didn't know Uliganuo very well would be silenced on the spot if they called him that. Uliganuo jumped up and slammed his fist on the wall when he saw Sillin. "Oh fuck. You're finally here, Sillin. I was just talking about you. Look, those people outside are still pretending to be gentlemen, but the real prince in front of us is already cursing out of habit." Since they ran into Uliganuo, there was no need for the guide to continue. "What are you talking about me for?" Sillin walked over and asked. "What else could it be? Naimi is bragging so much that he even took out that award-winning flying car model to show off to a bunch of flying car enthusiasts. Zhen Xingming, Uliganuo, and Belle had won quite a lot of money during the flying car race that Sillin and Naimi participated in. It was pocket money that belonged to them, and they didn't have to worry about their families." Libero's face twitched again. Since when did Sillin participate in a flying car race? Libero was busy with his mission at the time, and he didn't pay much attention to the racing car race because he didn't have the funds to do so. That was why he didn't know that Sillin had participated in that very influential race. Moreover, the people who left the deepest impression on everyone during the race were Vegfritter, the young master of the Sizer family, and Naimi, the young master of the Sizer family. As for Sillin, he didn't show his face much, and the Sizer family had blurred his name at Sillin's request. That was why not many people remembered Sillin. "Who's this?" Uliganuo looked at Linani with interest. He remembered Libero a bit, but he didn't know this girl at all. "She's a friend of my younger brother, Kiva Linani," Sillin explained. Linani bowed cautiously to Sillin. This bow was different from the one she had used before. It was a special greeting for royalty. Royals had their own special greeting as well. Uliganuo waved a hand after Linani was done. "You don't have to be so reserved since you're Sillin's friend. Relax a bit." Linani nodded hurriedly. She didn't care what Uliganuo meant by relax a bit. "Kaka, your smile is so perverted," Hui Mao said. Uliganuo wasn't angry at all. Instead, he greeted Hui Mao with a chuckle. "Hey Wheeze, I've prepared a lot of good food today." Uliganuo's image in Hui Mao's mind was instantly upgraded from perverted to friendly. Uliganuo explained that all three of them had agreed to the guards stationed at the entrance of the venue. It was because their identities were public, and too many visitors came to visit them. It was to the point where they were annoyed to no end, so someone suggested that they be stationed at the entrance. That was how things turned out. When Sillin walked into the room Uliganuo mentioned, a silver-white shadow flew toward him. Sillin didn't try to dodge. Hui Mao leaped into the air and bit down. Hui Mao was already holding the vegetable-shaped model tightly in his mouth by the time he landed on the ground. "Hey, don't. Please have mercy, Lord Cat." Naimi jumped over to Hui Mao's side and tried to say something nice. The people who were yelling at Hui Mao were about to curse him when they saw him holding the model in his mouth, but they immediately swallowed their words back into their stomachs when they saw the cowardly look on his face. What a joke, he even called him Lord Cat. How would they dare to curse him? Wouldn't that be suicide? "Sillin, get over here." Zhen Xingming pushed away the two beauties beside him and placed 3 bottles of alcohol on the table. "You're late, so you'll punish yourself with 3 bottles." Celine didn't say much. She picked up the bottle and started to pour without stopping. 3 bottles of wine were finished just like that. "Good." The obviously drunk Zhen Xingming slammed the table and roared again. His so-called princely demeanor was completely gone, and Linani was staring at him with a look of disbelief on her face. Sillin shook his head. No wonder Zhen Xingming was punished every time he returned home. His father's spies knew everything he did outside, and he was going to get whipped again after the wedding. He might even be sent to the army for another round of furnace modification. Belle thought Linani looked familiar, so he clapped his hands after Sillin's explanation. "I was wondering why you looked so familiar. You're Chang For's wife." "Linani." Lunani's impression of the three princes had been completely overturned, completely overturned. Sillin patted Belle's shoulder and told him to stop. Lunani's face was so red that it looked like it was about to bleed. Naimi finally managed to get the vegetable fritter model back from Huemao's mouth with a plate full of food. Tears streamed down his face as he complained to Sillin, "I'm telling you, Sillin, you have to pay me back with an intact one. You deserve it." There was no way Sillin wouldn't understand Naimi's intentions. He wanted Sillin to build another car for himself. He didn't have the time to build one right now. After learning that the young man who just walked in was the racer Naimi was talking about, a few knowledgeable enthusiasts came over to talk to him. They had watched the racing competition, but their experience wasn't as deep as Naimi's. Some of them even hoped that Sillin could drive the car again so that they could experience what Naimi was talking about. Ever since the flying car race, Naimi had taken the lead, and a lot of other young nobles who loved flying cars were planning to change their flying cars into vegetable-shaped ones. However, vegetable fritter hadn't officially entered production yet, and there were a lot of technical issues that needed to be solved. That was why there were less than 10 vegetable fritters in production right now. They were limited in number, and all of them were made by Fleeka. Right now, there was a long line of people waiting to order vegetable fritter from the Sizer family. While they were talking, the door opened and a couple more people walked in. Sillin immediately knew that two of them were the culprits who had caused trouble for them with their flying cars. However, after greeting the crowd, the duo walked away from Sillin and bowed in apology. The surrounding people were still wondering what was going on, but the two of them were quite frank and explained what had happened. At the time, they had sent someone to investigate the rental car's serial number, but the Rawl family's supervisor had issued a warning when they found out that it was Sillin. Later, they were warned by their family members again, and it was only then that they realized that they had run into someone they shouldn't have. They had to apologize first, or they would be in big trouble if the other party took the initiative. That was how the scene unfolded. "Ha, you guys have a pretty big deal. You want to race with Sillin? Are you tired of living?" Naimi snorted. "Ahem, of course I don't know. Cut the crap, who doesn't know what kind of people you are?" It looked like Naimi knew them, but since they were here, Sillin didn't say anything out of respect for Naimi. Halfway through, Sillin excused himself to go out and drain the water. He walked through the long hallway and arrived at a secluded place. He looked at the hidden cameras around him, pressed a button on his wrist and entered a room in a flash. It was a place to store goods, sofas, tools and so on. After Sillin entered the room, he looked around once and said, "Come out." A figure slowly came into view after Sillin's voice. It was a robot, a Black Viper robot. After Sillin took over Guan Feng's position, the robot's programming had changed. They wouldn't attack Sillin because they knew where Sillin was in Black Viper. "What happened? What's your mission here?" Chapter 295. Unlike humans, Black Viper's robots didn't have their own private activities, so they were usually sent out on a mission. The reason why Black Viper's robots were sent out on a mission couldn't be a small matter. Take the Sea Blue Gold incident for example. The mastermind behind the incident had directed the RAS academicians who were busy trying to make themselves famous. But ever since then, the research on Sea Blue Gold had progressed by leaps and bounds, and the results were remarkable. This was why it was said that leaders were born strategists. Speaking of which, Sillin hadn't received any news about the Black Viper incident when he arrived here. Guan Feng hadn't completely let go of Sillin, and Sillin was just getting used to it. Still, there was no way he wouldn't have informed Sillin about it if it was something serious. The robot hadn't told Sillin about the incident before, but it wasn't going to hide it from Sillin now that he had asked. "We're here to monitor the suspected carrier of the virus," said the robot. The suspected carrier of the virus? Sillin was puzzled. He hadn't heard anything about the carrier of the virus since he arrived on this planet. Yes. The robot told Sillin the cause of the incident and all the relevant information. A virus had appeared in the Empire, and it was called the zebra virus by the RAS virology. This didn't mean that the virus was related to zebras, but that the symptoms caused by the virus were striped just like the stripes on a zebra's body. At first, it would be reflected in the change of color on the surface of the body, with the appearance of two alternating colors. As the disease progressed, from light to dark, the nerves and muscles would be seriously affected. The muscles would soften and harden according to the appearance of the two alternating colors. The alternating softness and hardness would be the same as the color distribution on the surface. Both overly softened and hardened muscles would cause inconvenience to the human body, and in the end, the patient would lose all mobility. The body's conditioned reflexes would become sluggish, and the body's nerve conduction would be obstructed. However, the nerves in the brain would be relatively normal, and the patient would be conscious enough to know that they were dead. It had to be said that this was a form of torture. Unable to move, unable to speak, and even facial expressions began to fade. He could only express his emotions through his eyes. As his condition worsened, his pupils began to change color, becoming the same color as the stripes on his body. At first, a group of patrolling soldiers from the 11th star region detected an uninhabitable planet's energy signature and went to collect energy ores. However, they found 5 people who had been dead for many days, and next to them was an energy ore that had been dug out. The energy mine on this planet was not located on the surface, so it was not easy for the patrol to detect the energy mine deep underground. If the 5 people had not dug out some of the energy mine, the patrol would not have discovered the energy signal at all. Since it was an energy mine located deep underground, how did these 5 people know about it? Obviously, they were not the only 5 people who had come, because the patrol saw traces of aircraft landing there, but when they arrived on the planet, they did not see any aircraft. This meant that they actually had companions, but their companions had left them behind and left. The 5 people who had died did not have any wounds on their bodies. The patrol pulled off their protective suits and saw their miserable state. All 5 of their bodies were covered in 2-colored stripes. Some were greenish-red, some were blackish-purple, and some were bluish-yellow. These were all symptoms caused by different virus mutations. The soldier who pulled off the 5 people's protective suits also noticed that something was wrong when he saw this. He immediately reported to the others, then took a bit of the deceased's blood for analysis. The result was that they had died of a virus. The soldiers were all wearing protective suits. After collecting some information, they returned to the fleet. When they returned to the base, they went to the sterilization room to perform 6 layers of sterilization. However, not long after, the soldiers' fingernails began to show 2-colored stripes. At first, they did not feel any discomfort, but because they had seen the 5 dead people, the soldiers were quickly sent to be examined. None of them returned to the base. Because of the existence of this unknown substance, ordinary virus scanners could not detect its existence at all. Analyzers could only determine whether it was caused by a virus or other causes based on the patient's physical condition. Many sterilization equipment could not completely kill this single-stranded virus. The 6 layers of sterilization in the sterilization room did not kill the virus, but only temporarily inactivated it. When the conditions were right, it would become active again. The samples they collected from the 5 dead people were later sent to the RAS. The RAS's Institute of Virology listed this new virus as a Level 1 dangerous object. At the same time, the RAS named this new virus the zebra virus. Soon, the entire patrol team was quarantined. 3 days later, under the RAS's special virus scanner, more than 60% of the patrol team were diagnosed with the zebra virus. However, there were many people who came into contact with the patrol team. Later, the virus spread more and more, from one planet to another, from one star sector to another. Because the incubation period of the virus varied, even if the RAS rushed to create a detector to detect the latent virus, it also made the work more difficult. There were so many planets and countless people. How could they capture every single one of them and use a detector to detect them? Now that the higher-ups had purposely suppressed the matter, Black Viper's people began to get busy. Because it was inconvenient for humans to move around, Black Viper's robots were the ones tracking down the virus' primary mutants and prototypes in secret. Sillin counted the days and asked, was this the reason why Shikai had to leave during the Black Viper handover meeting? Yes, but the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor contacted Lord Shi urgently. But if this virus is so dangerous, why haven't I heard anything about it for so long? Also, why would the three kings let Zhen Xingming and the other two run around if the situation was bad? The Wind Chief said not to tell you yet. The virus is still contained in the 11th star region, so there are many things that haven't been made public yet. I think the three kings must have felt that this place is too far away from the 11th star region, so they didn't restrict the three princes. If an infected person appears in this star region, the people protecting the three princes will definitely kidnap the three princes and bring them back. Sillin shot him a glance. Guan Feng hadn't completely handed over his authority yet, so his words still carried more weight than Sillin's. However, the reason Guan Feng didn't want Sillin to get involved wasn't because he didn't want to give up his authority, but because he didn't want Sillin to get involved. Guan Feng hadn't been involved in virus research in the past, so he hadn't participated in any research projects related to viruses or molecules even though he was an academic in Black Viper. But Sillin was different. Guan Feng was afraid that Sillin would get involved. The initial research of a new virus was the riskiest, and this was Guan Feng's way of protecting Sillin. No wonder Guan Feng hadn't handed over his authority even though Gu Chang'an and Christian had already handed it over. It was because he knew about this a long time ago, and that was why he hadn't given up yet. It was because a verbal handover didn't count. Black Viper's robots would set up a new program after the actual handover. The people responsible for changing the program were the decision maker, the royal family member, and the executor, Shikai. Both of them had obviously been notified by Guan Feng beforehand. How high is the death rate right now? 10% of the infected are dead, 30% are in critical condition, and the rest are in the early stages of infection. This virus mutates very quickly, and there are many derivatives of it. That's why we haven't produced a satisfactory antibody yet. The medicine we produce is only able to prolong the patient's lives a little longer, the robot said. You haven't determined the route of transmission yet? Sillin asked again. It spread through the respiratory tract, body fluids, and bodily secretions. Up until now, everyone who came into contact with the patients has been infected. What's the situation with the foreign races? The foreign races aren't immune either. The virus mutates even faster in their bodies. Sillin fell silent for a moment. The robot continued. Later on, the military and Black Viper conducted a two-pronged investigation and discovered that the planet discovered by the patrols was not the origin of the virus. Now, there are two viewpoints. One is a conspiracy theory. They believe that this is a conspiracy, that someone deliberately arranged such an incident to release the virus in order to take revenge on the dynasty. As for the other point of view, it's mostly people from the Royal Academy of Sciences. They've taken out some experimental results as a basis and believe that this virus molecule isn't man-made, but a new type of molecule formed naturally. There's a great deal of chance. You got the molecular diagram, right? Let me see, Sillin said. The robot's eyes flashed, and two beams of light shot out of them to form a three-dimensional image in front of it. The image showed the structure of a high-level mutated virus. The molecular diagram of all the atoms that made up the virus was clearly displayed. It was a single-stranded virus molecule. Human DNA was a double-stranded helix, so it was relatively stable. However, single-stranded DNA like this was much less stable, let alone a single-stranded virus like this. Sillin pointed at a black circle on the molecular diagram and asked, "What does this represent?" Unknown substance. No clue at all. No, this is a substance that has never been seen before. The people from the RAS and the Black Vipers research group haven't come up with any useful information so far, but they have pointed out that to understand this substance, we have to start with the original virus. So far, only a small portion of the virus samples have been obtained, and the original virus has never been seen before. It was because of this that the RAS virology department rejected the conspiracy theory and supported the idea of natural formation. However, was there any use in arguing about this at a time like this? Either way, there was no progress on either side. Send me all the information you have on this zebra virus. Sillin turned on the communicator in his hand. This communicator had a secure receiving function and could store a large amount of information. The robot didn't refuse and directly transmitted all the information it knew to Sillin. You came to this planet because you found a carrier of the virus? We're not sure, we're just following them. A noble from the 11th star region came out of the wedding, and although the 11th star region is currently in a closed state, they're still lenient toward the nobles. They didn't find any virus when they came out, but the higher-ups told us to follow them and take immediate action if we found any. Sillin nodded. Who are you following then? Where is he right now? The robot named a person, and this person was one of the people who entered the room later. Keep watching and notify me if anything changes. Got it. Sillin waved a hand, and the robot's figure faded away once more. Sillin stood outside for a while longer to digest the information the robot had given him. Finally, he returned to the room. The room was as noisy as ever. Naimi was talking about veg fritter with a couple of people, and Zhen Xingming and the others were talking about how they made a lot of pocket money from betting on the flying car race. Thanks to Belle's care, Libero and Lanani weren't harassed by anyone when Sillin left. In fact, they even made a couple of friends and started a new conversation. Hui Mao, on the other hand, was having a lot of fun. Sometimes he would join Zhen Xingming and the others in jeering, but his twitching ears told Sillin that he had been paying attention to his surroundings all this time, including Sillin's meeting with the robot and their conversation. Hui Mao stopped eating when he saw Sillin. He jumped onto Sillin's shoulder and asked, "What are you going to do?" "Let's wait and see. I'll research that thing after the wedding." Hui Mao looked absent-minded. He clenched his claws and scratched Sillin's shoulder. It took him a long time before he finally said, "I think it's best if you don't get involved." "Why?" Sillin walked over to the sofa and lay down. He kicked the red-faced Zhen Xingming who was about to come over and drag someone to drink with him to the side. "I think this virus is very dangerous." "Even you think it's dangerous?" "Not really. I'm sure I can resist it. If the robot isn't afraid of me, why should I?" "But you can't. You're a complete organic life form, and this virus is different from the ones I've come into contact with before. That unknown substance especially, I can't figure out what it is." Hui Mao said while his ears drooped. Sillin didn't say anything. Hui Mao had the same thought as Guan Feng, but Sillin didn't want to avoid it just like that. "Sigh, Sillin, can we just ignore that? We can just give up our position as Black Viper's leader and be a free hunter." Hui Mao missed his old life in the League of Stars a little. Sillin picked Hui Mao up from his shoulder and scratched his chin. "Do you want to go back?" I kind of miss them." Hui Mao tilted his head and showed his chin for Sillin to scratch. Sillin naturally knew who Hui Mao was referring to. Why wouldn't he want to go back? But he couldn't go back. Sillin's thoughts returned to the zebra virus while he scratched Hui Mao's chin. According to the robot's message, Black Viper had collected 10,000 highly active virus samples from 10,000 patients. However, more than half of them were high-grade mutants of the zebra virus, and the rest were mostly mid-grade mutants. Just like the robot had said, there were very few low-grade mutants, and there was no way he would be able to find answers from the virus itself. Whether it was artificially synthesized or naturally formed, the higher the level of mutation of a virus, the more it would conceal its original method of formation. The robot did not have the analytical diagram and diagram of the primary mutant virus, so if Sillin wanted to know, he would have to personally ask for it. However, if he asked for the information of the primary mutant virus, then Sillin would truly be participating in this work. Sillin wasn't afraid or averse to this kind of research, but Guan Feng probably wasn't the only one who objected to Sillin's participation. It made sense. If it really was a high-risk virus, then there was no one who could replace Sillin if something happened to Sillin. At the very least, no one had found a suitable candidate yet. Even the members of Black Viper who weren't familiar with Sillin probably wouldn't agree to it. Their objection wouldn't sway Scylla much. After all, Scylla was one of the 3 leaders of Black Viper. It was just that it might be a little troublesome when the time came, and there were definitely going to be a lot of delays. Hey, Scylla, what are you thinking about? Bell shoved Zhen Xingming to the side and put his arm around Scylla's shoulder. He came over and told Scylla about the beautiful girls he saw just now. Scylla listened with a smile on his face. When Bell offered to introduce a few girls to Scylla turned down the offer. He wasn't used to the noble's way of doing things. It felt like he was selling himself. The way the girls looked at Zhen Xingming and the others reminded Scylla of the wolves in the forest. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. If Zhen Xingming and the others hadn't displayed their unpredictable temperament in public, those girls would have probably forced themselves on them already. Scylla had been paying attention to the robot's movements all this time. Although the gray cat was very reluctant for Scylla to interfere, it still had to pay attention to the robot's movements at all times. The gray cat pondered in its heart. If it discovered an infected person, should it forcefully kick Scylla unconscious and drag him back to his second grandpa's master to lock him up, or should it use a soft policy of feigning illness? Either way, the past 2 days were relatively peaceful. Nothing major happened during the race with Naimi and the discussion with a couple of racing enthusiasts. Just like that, the wedding finally began. Scylla delivered the gifts with Zhen Xingming and the others, and the core members of the Lore family and Gleason family who received them were smiling so widely that their faces were practically blooming chrysanthemums. They didn't dare to mess around with Zhen Xingming and the others, but they didn't dare to mess around with Scylla. After all, there was a difference in the treatment between those with royal blood and those without. Scylla felt goosebumps all over his body when he saw the meaningful and overly friendly smiles on their faces. He found an excuse to leave the room and catch his breath. But Scylla's communicator rang before he could catch his breath. Scylla looked at the character code on the communicator and answered, "What's up, Coach Guan?" Chapter 296. What is it that you don't know? Guan Feng asked impatiently. Scylla knew that the robot would report everything to Guan Feng. Why else would the robot tell him everything it knew so easily? That was because Teacher Guan was watching. What's the situation right now? Scylla asked. The robot was only monitoring the nobles from the 11th star region, so it didn't know a lot of the core information. It's not looking good. Guan Feng sighed. I really don't know if I should say that you're unlucky or that I'm just too unlucky. You've only just taken over, and now you're running into something like this. Scylla listened to Guan Feng quietly without interrupting. It was exactly because of Scylla's behavior that Guan Feng felt helpless. He knew Scylla very well. Scylla was a man of few words, but he was incredibly stubborn. If he wanted to turn his head somewhere, no one would be able to stop him no matter how hard they tried. The RAS had been suppressing the news for a long time, and the Empire's higher-ups were doing their best to keep it a secret as well. Unfortunately, they wouldn't be able to keep it up for too long. If the situation got out of control by then, and they still hadn't produced an antibody or an effective countermeasure, the consequences would be dire. Guan Feng wasn't a member of the Institute of Virology, but he was still part of the management of the Imperial Academy. The management had held several meetings since the outbreak, and it was obvious that the situation wasn't looking good from Guan Feng's tired expression. Don't interfere, Scylla. Leave the virus to the professionals from the RAS and Black Viper. We have enough manpower, so there's no need for you to get involved. Even if you want to get involved, don't stand at the front lines, Guan Feng said. His voice was heavy and calm. Scylla didn't answer him directly. Instead, he asked, what is that substance? Guan Feng wiped his face. You're quite stubborn, aren't you? Both sides fell silent for a while before Guan Feng said, think about it again. The virus hasn't spread beyond the 11th star region yet, so it's too early for you to get involved. You might as well focus on your own things. All right. Guan Feng stared at Scylla in astonishment. He didn't expect Scylla to agree so quickly. Scylla didn't look like he was lying either. Guan Feng ended the call after a brief exchange. He still had a meeting to attend, and the RAS Council of Scientific Society was useless except for a bunch of executives. They were all talk and no action, and even now, they were still pretending to be busy. Wasn't this just torture? Even the good-tempered Guan Feng couldn't keep up the act any longer. He wasn't a professional in this field, but there were some things he was aware of. The threat posed by this virus was too great, and the meeting yesterday was a joint meeting between the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor's Special Department and the RAS's management. In the end, they came to a decision that if the virus spread beyond the 11th star region, the Empire would wipe the infected planets off the star map. This would be a permanent wipe, unlike Black Viper's area, which was temporarily dug up by humans. If they did that, it wouldn't just be a single planet that was wiped out. At least 100 heavily infected planets in the 11th star region would be wiped out, including some with ancient civilizations and cultural heritages. Wiping them out would be a huge loss to the Empire, and the Emperor wouldn't approve such a decision unless it was absolutely necessary. After ending the call with Guan Feng, Sillin stood quietly outside the wedding hall for a while. The wedding hall was very lively. The middle and upper nobles were doing their best to make themselves known and attract attention. However, if even one of them was infected with the zebra virus, no one would be spared. Currently, being infected with the zebra virus meant death. Even if a lot of medicine and technology were used, it would only delay the inevitable. It was extremely easy to be infected, the mortality rate was high, and the coefficient of variation was high. There was no need to mention the people from the RAS. Black Viper had a lot of one-track minds, and Neo was the kind of person who wouldn't come out until he got a result. Their infection rate was probably much higher than the RAS's. After thinking for a moment, Sillin turned on his communicator and contacted Sillin. At the time, Neo had told Sillin all of his numbers, and there was no way he would let this opportunity slip through his fingers if he wanted to research the zebra virus. Go watch the wedding, Sillin. The bride almost tripped over her long skirt just now. Wheeze ran over on its tiptoes to share the hilarious scene it saw just now with Sillin. Who was Huimao? A cyborg cat. This guy was like an automatic camera. Everything he saw could be replayed in the form of a projection. Sillin pinched Huimao's ear when he saw the bride's sorry state. What did you do this time? The gray cat looked away and shook its whiskers with a guilty look on its face. It's nothing. Cut the crap. I'm noticing that you're getting worse and worse. Of course not. You're framing me. It's slander. Oh right, since you're here, can you do me a favor? I want to contact Neo, but Black Viper will probably cause trouble for me. I need you to clean up the signal. Huimao glared at him. Didn't you promise Guan Feng to stay out of this and focus on your own business? Why are you contacting Neo? Although Huimao was causing a little trouble for the bride and groom at the wedding, he had been paying attention to Sillin's movements all this time. It was exactly because Sillin had promised Guan Feng that Wheeze would do more of its own things that it was so happy that it raised the automatic platform beneath the bride's feet a little. However, it quickly lowered it back down, and the bride tripped and nearly fell to the ground during this short period of time. I did say that I'm going to focus on my own business, but I didn't say that I'm not going to participate in this. You're lying. Liars will turn into shit in their next life. Sillin pinched Huimao's fur on his round face. What nonsense are you looking at now? Never mind, I have my ways even if you don't want to help me. Huimao might be angry, but he still helped Sillin contact Neo. Huimao was going to save him some time. Sillin looked around and found a secluded place to contact Neo. When he finally got in touch with Neo, Sillin's heart sank when he saw Neo's face on the screen. Neo was wearing a protective suit, but it couldn't hide his striped face through the transparent mask. Right now, Neo was busy in the lab that Black Viper had carved out of the quarantine zone. Sillin, hurry up and tell me what you need. I still have things to do. This zebra is killing me. Neo didn't sound depressed at all because of the virus. On the contrary, he looked full of fighting spirit. When did you get infected with the zebra virus? Sillin asked. About 10 days or so, but I made a medicine that can alleviate the symptoms. It could only alleviate the symptoms and not cure the root of the problem. Neo would die for sure if he couldn't produce a medicine that could counter the virus. How do you feel now? Sillin had read some reports about the complications of the virus, so he knew that it definitely wasn't a good feeling. When the subject was brought up, Neo cried out like he had experienced it deeply, "Oh my God. I'm telling you, Sillin, this is a really bad feeling. Do you see these stripes?" Neo pointed at his face behind the transparent mask. There were green and gray stripes on his face. It was another variant of the zebra virus. They are still very faint now, but I can already clearly feel that a part of the muscle cells in my body has begun to be torn apart by the cunning horse, while the other part is like a man and a woman in love who are about to fuse together. Sillin. He really couldn't understand what was going on in Neo's head. How could he speak in such a tone even though he was infected with the zebra virus? He was as pure and stubborn as an idiot. Neo thought of this as a different kind of battlefield, a battlefield between him and the virus. He definitely knew that he would die if he lost, but death wasn't his priority right now. His priority right now was to analyze the virus and conduct in-depth research on it. Only a person like Neo could maintain such high morale and spirit in a situation like this. If he went to the RAS, he believed that only a small number of people would be able to do the same. Those who were truly dedicated to academia would be able to do so. Sillin asked Neo to tell him everything he knew so far, and Neo didn't hide anything from Sillin. Huimao couldn't help but worry when he saw Neo's brilliant face. Far away in Black Viper's hinterland, Shikai was busy working in his workshop. Suddenly, the data on the main screen started jumping faster and faster. The system immediately sounded an alarm. Shikai and the robot next to him turned to look at the screen in surprise. "Someone is stealing data," the robot next to him said. If Sillin was here, he would have noticed that this robot was different from the other robots he had seen in his life. It was more intelligent and human, more like Sigma. It was obvious from the way it was frowning in thought. It's someone from Black Viper. There's no way he could have gotten into this system otherwise. Moreover, everything he stole is related to the zebra virus. Shikai entered some commands on the screen, but they quickly lost their effect. He couldn't stop the intrusion for now unless he turned off all his machines. A minute later, the data started jumping again. He left. I'm sure he knew someone was here, and I'm sure we would have seen such a forceful intrusion. Does this mean that the intruder intended to steal data openly for everyone to see? The robot next to him tilted its head and thought for a moment. Then, it also opened a screen. It didn't need to use its fingers, but the data on the screen started jumping automatically when its eyes flashed. A while later, the robot stopped and said in a puzzled tone, "This person is very powerful." "No, maybe he's not human." "You mean, a robot?" Shikai asked. "I can't say for sure. It's a very strange feeling." Shikai's communicator rang before he could figure out the reason. It was Guanfeng. "What is it, Chief Wind? Watch your side. I'm afraid that the stubborn Sillin will try to force himself on us. If you can't do it, just turn off all your machines." Guanfeng sounded very helpless. He really didn't want Sillin to get involved in this mess. "If you're talking about the zebra virus, then I think you're a step too late. He got the data he wanted just now. That guy just openly stole all the data and information right in front of us." Guanfeng. Chapter 297. With Huimao's help, Sillin obtained a lot of information from Black Viper regarding the zebra virus. Black Viper's people still hadn't come up with a unified solution, and the RAS also had their own theories. All in all, they had only determined a general direction, but they still hadn't come to a conclusion on how to proceed in that direction or what specific steps to take. Everyone knew that the virus' original form was the key, but where was he supposed to find the original form of the zebra virus? If what Neo said was true, and the original form of the zebra virus had already mutated a long time ago, wouldn't that mean that they couldn't come to a conclusion? Sillin skimmed through the information very quickly. Neo's words were reasonable, but he needed to make his own decision and come up with a solution based on the information he received. Black Viper's people were talented, and there were a lot of solutions that Sillin couldn't think of even if he was beaten to death. However, it was still uncertain whether they would work in the end. Besides that, Sillin also learned that a lot of Black Viper's people had changed their original solutions after they were infected with the zebra virus. Some of them were physically weak or had inborn immune deficiencies that couldn't be cured, so they passed away not long after they were infected with the zebra virus. However, they left behind a lot of valuable, detailed, and accurate records. The information obtained from these people was of great help to the research. Compared to the RAS, Black Viper's people had sacrificed more, but the results were also greater. These were all information that had been exchanged with their lives. After reading through the information, Sillin sorted out his thoughts and began to simulate the experiment in his mind. Black Viper had at least 1,000 different detailed solutions, and the RAS had 3 main solutions. The amount of energy Sillin's brain had expended in this short period of time could only be described as enormous. No one would believe that he could simulate more than 1,000 different experimental solutions in such a short amount of time, not to mention the fact that he could simulate more than 1,000 different experimental solutions at once. It wasn't that the solutions were completely wrong, but that there wasn't enough time to carry them out. Take Neo's case for example. Even if he could solve the problem after more than 300 days, there was no telling how many people would die from the virus by then. Therefore, Sillin had no choice but to learn from the different solutions, combine them with more solutions, and link them together according to his own judgment to come up with a final solution. It couldn't be helped. People like Black Viper and Neo would never accept another person's point of view, nor would they abandon their own to support someone else. Hui Mao was especially annoyed when he saw Sillin sitting there with his eyes closed. From Hui Mao's point of view, he wouldn't feel sad even if a bunch of people he didn't know died. However, he couldn't bear to lose those he knew. He was a selfish cat. Was it wrong to be selfish? Who cares if it was wrong or not? After a long time, Sillin opened his eyes and looked at Hui Mao, who was lying listlessly on the ground. He picked him up and carried him out of the room. "Where are we going?" Hui Mao asked weakly. He lowered his tail and looked at Sillin. "To Black Viper." "I'm not going." Hui Mao struggled free from Sillin's arms. His 4 claws were firmly nailed to the ground. He lowered his body, as if he didn't want to leave. "You really don't want to go?" Sillin didn't move. "I'm not going. I won't go even if you kill me. Then I'll go by myself." In the end, Hui Mao still followed Sillin when he was a certain distance away. However, he scratched Sillin's pants until they were like noodles again, and he was throwing a tantrum without saying a word. Even when Sillin placed a fresh fish biscuit next to Hui Mao's mouth, Hui Mao would eat it. He definitely ate it, but he wouldn't say a word or look at Sillin. Sillin definitely had to tell Zhen Xingming that he was leaving. He didn't tell him the real reason, but he did indirectly remind them to be careful and return immediately after the wedding. Zhen Xingming and the others were a little playful, but they still understood what Sillin meant. Although they didn't say anything after hearing Sillin's words, they still decided to do as Sillin said. After giving Zhen Xingming and the others some instructions, Sillin took Hui Mao to a good place for a flying car. However, to Sillin's surprise, someone was already waiting for him there. Gleason Dodge. Sillin looked at Gleason Dodge. The young man obviously knew that they were going to leave, and he hadn't stopped monitoring Sillin and Hui Mao at all. There were always a lot of people around Gleason Dodge who were in charge of protection. Some were in the open, some were in the shadows, some were in the visible, and some were invisible. The Gleason family really did protect Dodge like he was their treasure. "Are you going to the 11th star region to find a cure for the virus?" Dodge asked. "How do you know about the virus?" Sillin didn't think that Dodge would know about the zebra virus. There was no way he would know about the virus if he was in contact with the true core of the Gleason family. The core nobles of the upper echelons of the empire have received the news already. However, the emperor has ordered us to keep it under wraps for now, so it hasn't spread yet. Dodge had investigated Sillin before. Since Sillin had a close relationship with the Zhen family and was Guan Feng's favorite disciple, it wasn't surprising that he knew about the virus. Then may I ask why you are waiting here? I'm sorry, but I'm in a hurry. I hope that young Master Dodge can be more direct. Even if Sillin found out that he was being watched, he wasn't afraid of conflict with Dodge. Gleason Dodge shook his head. I'm not trying to cause trouble for you. I'm just waiting here to tell you that if you want to go to the 11th star region to find a cure for the virus, I suggest you go there. As he spoke, Gleason took out a star map, opened the star map of the 11 star regions, and pointed at one of the planets. Before the virus appeared in the 11th star region, I once went to the 11th star region, but one day, due to the ion storm and severe magnetic interference caused by the stellar flare anomaly in that region, I changed my original route. However, in that region, there was a planet that was affected the most. You're saying that planet might be related to the virus? When did you pass by that planet? Sillin asked. Dodge gave him a date, and the patrol team discovered the virus not long after that date. The planet the patrol team discovered wasn't far from the planet Dodge was pointing at, but it wasn't close either. It wouldn't be their first suspect. Why would you think that? Sillin asked again. After all, there was too much chance that something like this would happen. Stellar flare was a common occurrence, but a virus like this had never happened before. It's just my guess. It's up to you whether you want to believe it or not. Sillin paused for a moment and didn't press the issue. Instead, he asked, is there anything else you want to say? Dodge looked at the listless Huimao lying on Sillin's shoulder. Have I seen you guys somewhere before? What do you think? Never mind. Dodge turned around, waved his hand, and left with his men. Thank you for the information, Sillin said. Dodge didn't turn around. He didn't respond to Sillin's expression of gratitude. TSK, what are you being so arrogant for? Huimao said as if he was venting his anger. Sillin walked into the spaceplane and rubbed Huimao's round cat head. Alright, be a good boy and don't throw a tantrum. I'll go find Shikai after this is over and see if I can get the method Sigma used to travel through the galaxy. After that, we'll go back to the League of Stars and take a look. Really? Huimao's ears perked up and his eyes lit up. Yes, really. You'll turn into shit if you lie. Yes, I'll turn into shit if I lie. Hook claw. The gray cat lifted a front paw and curled its paw, revealing only a single curved cat nail. Sillin. Sillin gestured at the cat's claw with a finger and shook it twice. Then, he activated the spaceplane and left the planet. Not long after Sillin's spaceplane left, a robot appeared where the spaceplane was parked. Wind Chief, he's already left. Sillin received a message from Guan Feng not long after he left the planet. He thought that Sillin would return to Black Viper to study with Neo and the others, but Guan Feng flew into a rage when he learned that Sillin was going to the 11th star region. You're not allowed to go. Right now, the RAS's conference room was completely silent. The president of the RAS was in the middle of his speech when Guan Feng's roar cut him off. He was so scared that he forgot what he was going to say later that his face twitched again and again until it was as black as charcoal. Guan Feng pretended that he didn't see the expressions of the people around him. He got up and walked out while shouting. His usual calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. What's wrong with Guan Feng? Someone asked. I think one of his students caused some trouble. Another person who usually disliked Guan Feng slowly picked up his cup and sipped on his tea. It was best to cool down at a time like this. He didn't want to mess up in an important meeting like that hypocrite Guan Feng. The reason Sillin didn't hide it from Guan Feng was because he knew that he couldn't keep it a secret for long. He would have to deal with the Empire's special department if he wanted to go to the 11th star region, and Guan Feng would find out sooner or later. It would be a lot of trouble if that happened, so it was better to inform Guan Feng as soon as possible. Sillin turned off his communicator after Guan Feng had gone mad and cursed him. Then, he continued his journey to the 11th star region. Just like Sillin had learned, the 11th star region was heavily guarded, especially the regions with more serious problems. The planet Gleason Dodge had pointed out was also one of the heavily guarded regions. The spaceplane was inspected when it entered the 11th star region. As one of the higher-ups of Black Viper, Sillin naturally had a special pass that allowed him to enter and leave the planet. However, the inspection wasn't as simple as it seemed when he approached the heavily guarded region. It didn't matter if you were a noble or not. Even if you were an upper noble, you weren't allowed to leave the area. You had to stay inside the heavily guarded region obediently, or else extreme measures would be taken. This was an order from the higher-ups, and the people guarding the regions with the most serious problems were all from the Empire's special department. Wing was only in the open, while this department operated in the shadows. Nobles couldn't influence them at all. Sillin received a long-range warning before his spaceplane even got close to the guarded region. Sillin took out a special pass, but the other party didn't let Sillin in immediately. Instead, they told Sillin to drive his spaceplane into a space fortress. Sillin did as he was told. He would undergo a full-body scan inside the space fortress, and they wouldn't let him in if he was carrying a pathogen. The spaceplane went through several heavy antivirus tests at the entrance. However, when he got off the spaceplane, he saw two familiar faces. Tu Ba, Gu Xen. The two people who walked over were the people who were tested on that planet. At that time, Sillin and Byakuya had other arrangements. As for the others, Sillin only knew that they were placed in other positions in Black Viper, but they weren't under Sillin's direct jurisdiction. The person in charge of them was Christy Hadar. As soon as he saw Gu Xian and Tu Ba, Sillin knew that the so-called Empire's special department was the people tested by Black Viper. The Empire's so-called special department is made up of you? Sillin smiled as he walked towards Tu Ba and Gu Xian. As you can see. Gu Xian was also very happy to see Sillin again. I didn't expect to be a soldier again. Tu Ba was wearing a military uniform, but it was very different from the uniforms of the two armies of the Empire. At a glance, it was obvious that they were experienced in combat. The design of the military uniform was very suitable for combat. Hey, Wheeze, why are you so unhappy? Who bullied you? Gu Xian poked Huimao's ear and received a claw from Huimao. Who dared to bully it? Sillin curled his lips. It was you. Huimao pointed a finger at Sillin and complained, Sillin is a big bad guy, a big idiot, a big liar, and a big piece of shit. Sillin. Where did he learn this from? Gu Xian chuckled as he looked at Huimao's resentful expression and scratched Sillin's sleeve. What are you doing here? You should know that this is a critical ward. Tu Ba asked. At the mention of this, Gu Xian's smile disappeared and his expression turned serious. They had seen the symptoms caused by the virus before. No matter how strong one's physique was, it was inevitable. I'm here to look for clues about the virus. Clues? Did Black Viper send you? No, I came on my own. Gu Xian and Tu Ba didn't know that Sillin was one of the three new titans. They only knew of Christy Hadar. Sillin didn't explain his background to them. He only said that he was an academic like Neo and the others. The trio chatted for a while longer. Gu Xian and Tu Ba's expressions grew heavy when they learned that Neo was infected as well. Although the guy's words made them want to slap him, they had to admit that he was talented. If it wasn't for Neo's safety zone, they would have died a long time ago. Since Sillin had made up his mind, Gu Xian and Tu Ba knew that it was useless to try and persuade him otherwise. They told Sillin about the situation in this area. What do you think of this planet? Sillin opened the star map of the 11th star region and pointed at the planet Gleason Dodger was talking about. Oh, this one. Let me see. Tu-Ba brought up the planet's information. It's also one of the heavily infected planets. How much longer do we have? Sillin asked. Sillin wanted to know how much longer it would take for the planet to reach the time limit set by the higher-ups. Judging from the rate of spread of the virus on the planet would be wiped out if they couldn't produce a cure by the time the virus reached the time limit. The longer it took, the harder it would be to destroy the mutated virus. Originally, the virus could be destroyed by erasing the planet's energy, but after a while, the virus's survivability would increase, and it would infect other planets and regions a second time. Tu-Ba and Gu Xian understood what Sillin was trying to say. A moment later, they said, since a new cure has appeared, it should be able to buy us some time. We'll wait for the higher-ups, but no one knows when the order will come. It could be the next moment, or it could be a very long time. In other words, Sillin had to be careful if he was going to go. Alright, I got it. Let me know when the order comes, and I'll retreat immediately, Sillin said after he connected the communicator. Alright, be careful. There's the latest protective suit here. We all wear this when we move. Tu-Ba handed Sillin a few protective suits. One was definitely not enough, so he had to prepare a few more just in case. Sillin took the protective suit and looked at Gu Xian and Tu-Ba. Do you have enough for yourselves? This is definitely enough. Every once in a while, the latest modified protective suits will be sent over. We've already worn 3 versions. Tu-Ba gestured for Sillin not to worry about this. If there's a new protective suit, I'll send a robot to deliver it to you. They weren't the only ones guarding this place, there were robots as well. It wouldn't be too safe if all of them were robots. If others found out that the Dynasty and Black Viper were in cahoots, there was no telling how much trouble they would cause. Thanks. You're welcome. We haven't thanked you for your help yet. Sillin had brought his own protective suit, but compared to the latest version here, the one he had on hand was obviously safer. After Sillin left, Gu Xian and Tu-Ba sat on the railing, each with a cigarette in their mouth. The atmosphere was heavy. After a while, Gu Xian finally spoke first. Tu-Ba, do you think Sillin will be infected? Tu-Ba did not speak. He exhaled heavily, the smoke rising from his mouth obscuring Tu-Ba's expression. This smoke is really thick, Tu-Ba said. After that, the two of them stopped talking and sat there quietly, smoking. On the other side, Sillin piloted a small flying device toward the planet. The planet was in a mess. Not only were the ordinary people on the planet infected, even the military was infected. The rest were basically carriers who were still in the incubation period. No one would come to maintain order, and not a single flying device could fly out of the planet. It was as if all the flying devices had collectively malfunctioned. This was the work of the robots. The people of the planetary government had long escaped. To be exact, they had entered another place outside the planet, a place the Dynasty had opened up to treat the zebra virus. Perhaps some of these people were already dead, and some were still in the ward receiving experimental drugs to slow down their lives, but one thing was for sure, they had abandoned their people. Looking from space, the planet was flashing everywhere. That was the artillery fire from the chaotic battle, and the entire planet was already riddled with holes. By then, even if an effective drug was produced to counter the virus, the damage to the planet would not recover in a short period of time, and the people who had experienced this incident would find ways to migrate to the planet or even to other star regions. To them, this was hell. Even if everything was over, the fear that was deeply imprinted in their memories would be stirred up by the familiar scene. Before entering the planet, Sillin had used the spaceplane scanning system to analyze some energy reactions. This proved that the planet had indeed received relatively strong radiation from external energy not too long ago. However, this kind of radiation shouldn't be able to cause large-scale damage. Moreover, if it was just this kind of energy radiation, the probability of forming that kind of virus was not high. After scanning and analyzing the entire planet, Sillin drew a map of a place where there were still remnants of superpowers. All the satellite networks were also paralyzed, and the place Sillin chose was on the dark side. He found a place to land, and it was a place with few people, so Sillin's entry would not attract any attention. After putting on the protective suit, Sillin walked out of the spaceplane with the test tools in hand. However, the gray cat ran out of the spaceplane before him and shouted at Sillin, "There are viruses everywhere." "Sillin, check the protective suit again, don't let the virus seep in." After confirming that there were no problems with the protective suit, Sillin finally officially stepped out of the flying device. Huimao nervously observed Sillin's reaction, afraid that the next moment it would detect that Sillin was infected with the virus. This place was very remote, and it was strangely quiet at night. Humans weren't the only ones affected by the spread of the virus. Animals weren't spared either. Celine could even see the colors of the plants changing. This virus was so powerful that it didn't even choose its targets to infect. All living things were infected, and no one could avoid it. Was this really just a virus? Because of the continuous war, the sky on the planet was no longer clear, and there was no starlight. There was only fog, and under the dark sky, it made people feel unusually heavy. Only the sound of Sillin's footsteps could be heard. The withered leaves were still struggling on the branches, and they had not completely fallen off. However, some of the branches had softened and drooped weakly, while others were strangely stiff. The wind could not make them sway, as if they would break if they were forcefully swayed. The hair on Huimao's body stood on end. This place made him feel very uneasy, very uneasy. He was not wearing any protective gear, so he could feel the invasion of the virus. However, his internal organs had been converted to a mechanical state, so the virus was useless against him. This was the first time that Sillin had come into such close contact with the zebra virus. In the past, he was immune to viruses and certain toxins. Because of his body, he could spontaneously form the most ideal substance to deal with these invaders based on the virus he was infected with and the invading toxins. However, this time, Sillin was not confident. If he was really infected, would he be able to deal with it as he had in the past? It was undeniable that one of the reasons why Sillin dared to come here was because of his special physique. However, when he came into close contact with these substances, although he was separated by a protective suit, the chip in Sillin's body had already started to activate. It told Sillin that this zebra virus was really a strong enemy that he had never encountered before. What was more puzzling to Sillin now was the unknown substance on the virus. Looking at the data from the device in his hand, most of the zebra viruses around him were high-level mutants. Some of them were intermediate mutants, but he still did not see any low-level mutants. "Sillin, let's go back to the spaceplane." Out of habit, Huimao was about to use its claws to hook Sillin's pants. When it saw the protective suit that Sillin was wearing, it suddenly stopped and retracted its claws. Sillin nodded and walked back to the spaceplane. One of the hatches of the spaceplane had been modified and installed with the latest antivirus equipment. After multiple antivirus tests, Sillin took off the protective suit in one of the buffering rooms and had his body sterilized again. It took him a long time before he came out. Before Sillin landed, he launched a sample collection device to various places on the planet. It would detect the virus data in various places and report to Sillin immediately. Now that the sample collection device was in place, it began to collect and analyze the data. Sillin turned on the main control system to observe the newly collected data. From the data, Sillin was able to know the situation of the virus in various places on the planet, and the proportion of low-level mutants, intermediate mutants, and high-level mutants among these viruses. The place where Sillin landed had many sample collection devices launched in a small area. This was the key area that he marked on the map, and he had to focus on analyzing it. Looking at the data, Sillin frowned. The data analysis in various places was similar, and there were basically no low-level mutants. However, when these collected sample analysis data were distributed on the latitude and longitude map according to the color difference, the results were obvious. The darker areas indicated that the proportion of intermediate mutants and low-level mutants was larger, and the areas with low-level mutants were especially dark. According to the map, the darkest area on the entire planet was a few steps away from the landing point where Sillin was now. It was really here. Sillin, send the robot, Huimao said. Sillin hesitated for a moment, then contacted the nearest robot on the planet and told the robot to pay attention. The robot followed Sillin's instructions and went in that direction. On the screen inside the aircraft, Sillin and Huimao stared closely to see if there was anything unusual. Everything was the same as what Sillin saw when he went out, but when the robot walked to the place Sillin marked, Sillin's contact with the robot was cut off. The tracking monitor flashed, and the surrounding situation could not be seen clearly. Sillin had no choice but to move the monitor away from that place, and the image became clear again. The robot that was sent over stood there quietly and did not move at all. There was not even a signal. What's going on? Huimao was puzzled. When it was outside, it did not notice anything unusual. Although it did not go to that place, it really did not feel anything unusual. After a moment of silence, Sillin got up and walked into the sterile buffer room to put on the protective suit. It seemed that he had to do it himself. Sillin finally moved his gaze away from his hands and looked at Huimao. Wheeze. What? I've been infected. I've been infected. How is that possible? Aren't you wearing a protective suit? Huimao walked around Sillin as if he wanted to confirm it. He took a closer look at the protective suit that Sillin was wearing. There was no damage. The respirator, gas exchange tube, and the newly added internal virus filter were all intact. How could he be infected? How could this be? The protective suit is useless. You're lying. Gu Xian and that mud guy told me that this is the latest protective suit. The lunatics from Black Viper and the old guys from the RAS have all tested it. How can it be useless? Sillin, don't lie. If you lie, you'll turn into shit. Huimao really wanted to jump over and scratch Sillin's face. I'm not lying. Sillin did not turn around and sat down. Just as Sillin was about to leave, he noticed that a substance had penetrated the protective suit and entered his body through the surface of his skin. Then, the familiar molecule started to slowly synthesize. It was not fast, but it was indeed synthesizing the molecule according to the familiar zebra molecule. It was also recognized by the RAS and Black Viper as a primary mutation. After the primary mutation was completed, it went through a second change. It was synthesizing toward another familiar molecule, which was recognized as an intermediate mutation. If not for Sillin's computer-like body, he would not have noticed it. Sillin was shocked. He did not expect the so-called virus to be that thing. Wheeze, I've found the virus, Sillin said. His tone was neither fast nor slow. There was no sign of emotion from the infection. The gray cat was pacing anxiously on the spot, but its eyes lit up when it heard that Sillin had found the virus source. According to the researchers from both sides, they would be able to solve this problem even faster if they found the virus source and create the antiviral medicine. What is it? Where is it? Huimao asked hurriedly. Sillin pressed a button on the communicator on his wrist, and a green screen popped up. Sillin raised his hand and tapped on the screen. The speed of his fingers was so fast that normal people would not be able to see Sillin's movements. They would not even be able to see the characters flashing on the screen. However, Huimao could see it. Following Sillin's new set of procedures, Huimao's eyes changed. His pupils expanded until they covered his entire eyeball. The glowing green light was eerie in the dark. I see it. The gray cat converted the scene it saw and projected it for Sillin to see. The image had filtered out all the other organisms, and it was an ultramicroscopic image. There were only a few floating light spots on the image, and they were connected to other bands. The bands were the so-called zebra virus, and the very small number of light spots in a free state were the unknown substances in the molecular map that had yet to be identified. This unknown substance was the zebra virus that everyone had been searching for. No one would have thought that the virus was the unknown substance. Even Sillin was shocked when he discovered the truth after he was infected with the substance. He had never seen a virus with such a single substance. It was like a pure atom, but this atom was full of mysteries. Its internal structure could not be determined, and it could not be defined. Even if such a substance was found and the zebra virus was found, the next step would be even more difficult to solve. For the researchers of the zebra virus, it was like charging electricity for a long time. They were ready to use all their energy on the target, but in the end, they found that the target was an insulator. More importantly, this substance could penetrate the protective suit. Sillin reprogrammed the sample collectors with a new set of procedures and detection methods. Hui Mao would track these sample collectors and guide them to the correct path of detection. 2 hours later, Sillin got the results. Other than this place, there was no free original substance at all. The free state of this original substance was not stable, and it would quickly attract other needed elements to the stable state of the virus to synthesize. In a relatively short period of time, it would go through a primary mutant, intermediate mutant, and then a relatively stable, advanced mutant. However, although the advanced mutant was relatively stable, it was only relative. They would undergo subsequent mutations according to the different conditions in the host cells. Because there were too many advanced mutants, everyone called the relatively stable virus mutants after the intermediate mutant as advanced mutants. What are you going to do? Hui Mao looked at Sillin with a sad face and scratched the ground with its claws. I told you not to come, but you are so stubborn. What are you going to do? Look, you are infected with the virus. Even if your body is different from normal people, you are not superhuman. Do you really think you are a robot? Whis hadn't stopped mumbling since just now, and Sillin didn't reply either. He just sat there quietly and stared at the data displayed on the light screen. After a while, Sillin stood up and walked toward the robot. What are you doing? Don't go. Do you want to die? Hui Mao did not care so much. Its body suddenly expanded, and its appearance became fierce. Its long fangs opened, blocking Sillin's path. Sillin let out a sigh before walking over and rubbing the gray cat's enlarged head. He said, I'm going to look for the cause and see if I can find a solution. If I go back like this, then I'm dead for sure. Hui Mao's big ears flicked, and its round eyes stared at Sillin. It hesitated. Are you serious? Of course. I don't want to die. I will go with you. As soon as he said that, Hui Mao shrank again. This way, it would be more resistant to the virus. Sillin brought Hui Mao closer to the source. Because of the observation method from before, Hui Mao showed Sillin the ultramicroscopic image in its eyes. The closer they got to the source, the more pathogens there were. Without a doubt, this was the source of the zebra virus. Passing the robot standing there, Sillin walked toward the core. The measuring device in his hand was no longer working. This substance seemed to be able to affect the operation of machinery. It could be called a supervirus. Not only could it infect organisms, it could also affect machinery. Hui Mao squatted on Sillin's shoulder. The closer they got to the core, the more difficult it was for Hui Mao to move. Even in its organic form, it was still greatly affected. It could only rely on Sillin to move. To be honest, Sillin wasn't completely unaffected. Although the biochip embedded into his genes wasn't a pure mechanical substance, it still gave him a feeling similar to the one Whis was experiencing. The distance of less than 50 meters felt like he was running 50,000 meters with obstacles in his way. When he reached the core area, Sillin discovered that there was a basement here. It was very well hidden, and since this area was a remote area, it was also a heavily infected area. No one would come here, so it was no wonder that no one had discovered it until now. He found the entrance. It was not big, just enough for one person to go in and out. Sillin slid down and put on the night vision goggles. It was completely dark down there. Sillin did not dare to use the light. He was afraid that there were substances that could not be exposed to light. Some special departments in the military would also have similar professors in their training. This was because the places they were assigned to were very special. There might be some substances that could be easily decomposed when exposed to light. It would be fine if they were non-toxic, but some substances that were originally non-toxic would become highly toxic after being decomposed. Sillin did not learn this from the military. When he was still a shadow hunter, he had created many substances that could decompose in light. Although Sillin was still wearing the protective suit, it was better to use the night vision goggles to avoid any abnormal events other than vital gases. From the filtered image, it could be seen that there were more pathogens in the basement than outside. It was very likely that the virus was leaked from here. If that was the case, could the zebra virus really be artificially created? If that was true, the person who created the zebra virus could be called a genius, just like the mad scientist Ori Hansen who injected the chip into Sillin. There were no signs of animal life here. The laboratory was maintained the same as before. The equipment in the laboratory was not very advanced. Most of the instruments were models that had been eliminated by the Royal Academy of Sciences. Sillin found the owner of the place in one of the laboratories. However, the man had been dead for a long time. There was not much decomposition. People who died from the zebra virus would not decompose so quickly. The man looked like a mummy with a zebra crossing drawn on it. Sillin speculated that he was the first victim of the zebra virus and the first person to die from it. The underground laboratory wasn't big, so Sillin quickly walked around it. There were no traces of the zebra virus being produced. A few key machines had been destroyed by the owner of the place, but they were only malfunctioning. Sillin could still read some information from them. Hui Mao was not in the right state, so Sillin could not count on it. He took out a finger-long cylindrical instrument and waved it over the broken machine. Just as he finished reading the data, the instrument stopped working. This was the best it could do. The influence of the virus around them was too great. Even if Sillin was curious, he could not read the information on the spot. Is it done? Hui Mao was feeling very uncomfortable. Yes, let's go up and see what information is hidden in these machines. Sillin patted Hui Mao's drooping ears to comfort him. There was one more place that they needed to check before they left. The virus came from there. The dead man was leaning against the lab table. He was holding a stick in his hand. The surrounding instruments were smashed with this stick. Because the man had been infected by the zebra virus, he could not use much strength. That was why the data on the machine could be completely restored. Otherwise, it would have taken a lot more effort. The man was lying there, looking at a spot. It was a wall. Sillin walked to the wall and knocked on it. After confirming a spot, he used a knife to pry it open. Just as he made a crack, Sillin's vision went black, and he fell to the ground. Sillin, what's wrong? Hui Mao raised his paw to pat Sillin. It took a long time for Sillin to recover. Earlier, his vision had been dark, and he could not see what was shown through the night vision goggles. Now that he had recovered, Sillin looked up at the wall. From the place where the knife had pried open, there was only a broken bottle. As for the thing inside the bottle, Sillin rubbed his head, feeling very uncomfortable. Did the thing go into your body? Hui Mao asked with a trembling voice. Sillin knocked his head. I think so. Hui Mao wanted to cry. In the end, Sillin moved out step by step. He seemed to have lost his sense of balance. His cerebellum was about to rebel, and his brain was starting to show signs of rebellion. It was not looking good. However, after leaving the underground laboratory, Hui Mao jumped down from Sillin's shoulder. He did not know if it was because the thing in the bottle had gone into Sillin's body, but Hui Mao was not affected much. After changing his body size, he carried Sillin and quickly ran to the aircraft. It did not matter whether the virus was sterilized or not. In any case, he was already infected with the zebra virus. Sillin entered directly from the cabin door and not from the sterile room. After returning to the aircraft, Sillin sat on a chair and took out a few bottles of medicine to inject. Then, he sat there quietly. Hey, Silen, don't fall asleep. If you fall asleep, you won't wake up. Hui Mao circled around the chair. Who did you hear that from? That's what everyone said. Alright, I'll rest for a while. Don't disturb me. You'll wake up after falling asleep, right? Of course. Lying turns into shit. Yes, it turns into shit. Hui Mao jumped onto a nearby table and squatted down to stare at Silen. After thinking for a moment, he ran to the communicator on the aircraft and contacted Guan Feng. Guan Feng was in the middle of a meeting, and an urgent report had panicked everyone in the RAS. The Flaming Eagle Fulvig family's princess had been diagnosed with the zebra virus 3 hours ago. If it was just a trivial matter in the 11th star region, they could delay it for a while. But now that the royal family of one of the 3 kings was involved, the RAS could no longer shirk their responsibilities. The president of the RAS had summoned all the senior executives. I don't care what you are doing or where you are right now, don't even think about shirking your responsibilities. Therefore, Guan Feng reluctantly returned to the meeting room and sat down. He didn't understand. He knew nothing about viruses, so what was the point of sitting here and listening to these people bullshit about shirking their responsibilities? In the past, he used to parade around with the title of an academician as if he was afraid that people wouldn't know that he was a highly respected and knowledgeable person. But now he was completely wilted and couldn't come up with an effective solution even after a long time had passed. Guan Feng was only here to make up the numbers, so he didn't pretend to be patient and gentle anymore. Instead, he sat down and listened to these professionals bullshit. At the same time, he wondered what was going on with the little bastard and why he hadn't contacted him for so long. Guan Feng's communicator rang while he was lost in thought. This time, it wasn't a video call or an audio call. It was a few lines of text. Great teacher Guan Feng, this is Wheeze. Silen has been infected with the zebra virus and is asleep right now. Please don't let me disturb him. Guan Feng's mind exploded when he saw this line of text. At the same time, he slammed the table reflexively. Slap. A loud slam on the table interrupted the president of the Royal Academy of Sciences, who was in the middle of giving his speech. Chapter 299. The Dean of the Royal Academy of Sciences was sitting there with a dark expression on his face. A gloomy aura surrounded him. This was the second time Guan Feng had interrupted him like this. It was common knowledge that it was very difficult for a speaker to regain their composure once they were interrupted. His speech had long since vanished into thin air due to the sudden slap. The conference room was completely silent. The managers of the engineering department and the people from the literature department who were spacing out just now were pulled back to their senses and looked around blankly. The people who disliked Guan Feng picked up their glasses and pretended to drink in order to hide the gloating expressions on their faces. Guan Feng, on the other hand, was still staring at his communicator with his head lowered. His expression couldn't be seen clearly, but the pressure around him was incredibly low. His aura was even stronger than the dean's, who was sitting at the highest position in the conference room. The people who were sitting near Guan Feng subconsciously moved their buttocks away from him. The dean was going to call out Guan Feng's name, but he hesitated for a moment when he saw Guan Feng's aura and decided against it. He coughed and drew everyone's attention back to him. The situation is very urgent right now, but if you have urgent matters to attend to, you may leave. Normally, this kind of talk was just a formality or an indirect knock on someone's head. However, Guan Feng stood up and walked out of the conference room before the dean could finish his sentence. Not a single person in the conference room made a sound to stop him. The dean's expression grew even darker. His heart was beating erratically, and he wanted nothing more than to slam the table twice. In reality, Guan Feng wasn't trying to oppose the dean. He just wasn't paying attention to what the dean was saying at all. He was communicating with Hui Mao through encrypted text. Just now, Hui Mao had asked him what he should do next, but Guan Feng had lost contact with him before he could reply. The failure analysis of the communicator showed that the other side was suffering from extremely strong signal interference and couldn't connect. That was why Guan Feng was in such a hurry. He didn't pay attention to what the people in the conference room were saying and walked out of the conference room to contact the others. He had to find Silen as soon as possible, or Silen was dead for sure. A person who was infected with the zebra virus and didn't receive any treatment would die very quickly. While Guan Feng was busy contacting people, something had happened on Silen's side. Hui Mao was in the middle of communicating with Guan Feng when something strange suddenly happened around him. Almost all the electronic devices in the area were disrupted by this strange energy at the same time. After a series of bangs, all the machines around him were paralyzed, and a couple of precision detectors even exploded on the spot. All the hair on Hui Mao's body stood on end. He looked at Silen, who was sitting there with his eyes closed, as if he was facing a formidable enemy. This strange energy was coming from Silen. Silen wasn't in a good state either. The two substances in his body were in a state of scorching heat. The unknown substance that had rushed into his body was trying to forcefully assimilate and modify Silen's chromosomes, but the biochip that had been embedded into his chromosomes a long time ago wouldn't allow it to happen. If the unknown substance won, then Silen would turn into a pure humanoid virus body. If that happened, then Silen could no longer be considered a person. In fact, even his consciousness would disappear. The invasion signal his brain felt was pretty strong. Right now, Silen was adjusting the biochip inside his body to fight for sovereignty with the unknown substance, or to chase the invading unknown substance out again. The strange energy that had appeared out of nowhere was none other than the energy ripples produced by a round of battle. Hui Mao stared at Silen like a statue. He could sense Silen's vital signs, and they were still strong. He hadn't declined because of the virus, but two different colored stripes had appeared on Silen's face. One was black, and the other was white. Moreover, the boundary between the two colors was fairly clear, unlike the other infected, where the stripes were blurry. Silen. Hui Mao tried calling Silen's name, but he didn't get a response for a long time. Hui Mao was about to move closer and poke Silen a couple of times when he suddenly sensed something. He immediately jumped up and grabbed Silen by the back of the collar and dragged him out of the room. While he was dragging Silen, he accidentally bumped into a chair leg and a door frame a couple of times. Silen's forehead was bleeding from the impact. "I'm sorry, but the situation is urgent. I can't care so much. Don't blame me when you wake up," Hui Mao said in his mind. After dragging Silen out, Hui Mao didn't stop. He ran away from the spaceplane, and not long after, he heard an explosion from behind him. The spaceplane had exploded. Due to the abnormal energy disturbance, all of the spaceplane's settings were seriously messed up. Even its alarms were disabled and unable to sound a warning. The reason why the gray cat dragged Silen out of the spaceplane in a hurry was because it sensed that the spaceplane was about to explode. That was close. Hui Mao let go. He looked at Silen, who was lying motionless on the ground with his eyes closed. He then looked at the wound on Silen's forehead. The strange thing was, even if Silen was cut by a knife, he would recover very quickly. But now, with just 2 bumps, it was just a scratch. There was no sign of scab forming, and the wound was still bleeding. What should I do? Hui Mao panicked. It didn't have a communicator right now, and Silen's communicator couldn't be used either. It couldn't contact anyone on its own. After thinking for a moment, Hui Mao tilted its head and pricked up its ears to listen to the movements in the distance. Then, it picked up Silen's collar again and moved toward the direction where the sound of gunfire was the least. In fact, it would have been more convenient to carry a person in its current form, but Silen's body was very strange right now. If the person lying here wasn't Silen but someone else, it wouldn't even spare them a glance, even if it was Guan Feng. That substance had a huge effect on mechanical intelligence and organic life forms. After some consideration, it was still easier for an organic life form like this. That was why it could only drag Silen with its mouth in the form of a kitten towards the direction where there was less gunfire. A few more wounds appeared on Silen's body along the way. They weren't deep, but they didn't show any signs of scab forming at all. Hui Mao made sure that Silen didn't run into any big rocks while running. If he did, it couldn't guarantee that Silen wouldn't die from excessive blood loss when he woke up. The thought that Silen might not wake up made Hui Mao anxious. It wanted to scratch its paws, so it left very obvious scratches on the ground when it ran. It finally dragged Silen to a relatively calm place. The buildings here were already riddled with holes, and there were still flames and thick smoke coming out of many places. The smell of all kinds of burnt substances filled the air. Hui Mao didn't have time to think too much about it. It checked the network around it and found that it was still in a terrible state. The network was completely cut off, but it could still check the operation of the machines and know what kind of machines they were running. The good thing was that the energy fluctuations from Silen's body had calmed down, so Hui Mao could check the operation of the machines in this area more clearly. Suddenly, Hui Mao's ears twitched. It found a few medical equipment and a dozen patients there. There were also people in charge of simple injections. Okay, that's the place. Hui Mao dragged Silen closer to the place. At the same time, it was careful not to attract the attention of the people hiding in the ruins with guns. Those people didn't look like good people, and they were very murderous. The place that Hui Mao chose was underground. Many buildings on the surface had been bombed out of shape. Some people felt that they couldn't survive, so they wanted to drag more people to hell with them before they died. There were quite a lot of people like this. In their despair, they vented their anger by shooting and killing ordinary people. The army was gone, and the government was long gone. The world was really chaotic and desperate. People who wandered between death and madness were wavering, perhaps waiting for someone to make a decision for them. Due to the collapse of the network and the destruction of many electronic devices in the gunfire, this underground rescue point could still exist for a long time. In the past, without a high-end shielding device, it was absolutely impossible to hide for a long time with a thick stone slab that was only coated with some simple isotope material. There were some animals that were dead or not far from death. There were pets and wild beasts. Whether they were struggling at death's door or had been dead for a long time, they were all abandoned there. The people walking around with guns wouldn't even look at them. Maybe they would shoot again on a whim, turning the animals that were still breathing into sieves. Finally, it dragged Silen to the place. Hui Mao didn't immediately drag Silen into the building. It wanted to see what was going on inside and find a better way to get the people inside to treat Silen. Even if the treatment was useless, it was much better than the bleeding. After hiding Silen in a corner, Hui Mao ran into the building. It could detect the layout of the basement under the building, and it knew where the entrances and exits were. It found an entrance that was blocked by a thick stone slab. The gray cat was just about to force the stone slab open when its ears perked up when it heard movement inside. It retreated and hid behind a broken cupboard to observe the person who had come out. It was difficult to hear the voices behind the stone slab, and most people couldn't hear them at all. Wheeze, however, could. It was two girls, one old and one young. The older one was around 20 years old, and the younger one was no more than 10 years old. Judging from their faces, they had been infected with the zebra virus since a long time ago, and the two colored stripes on their skin were more obvious than usual. They could still move a little right now, but it would probably be difficult for them to do so in the near future. They looked a little ragged, but their eyes were still bright. Hui Mao had animal instincts, and it could tell whether a person was trustworthy or not from their eyes. They weren't bad. They probably wouldn't do anything that would incur the wrath of the heavens. Hui Mao had already confirmed their character, but Hui Mao was hesitating about how he should make them drag Silen into the building. Should he just jump out and say it? That didn't seem like a good idea. Silen said that all animals that could talk were rare in the Mist Bodhisattva Empire. It wouldn't be good if something bad happened because of this. Should he drag Silen over here? What if they refused to save him? What a pain in the ass. God knows what it hated the most was trying to figure out the minds of humans. Humans were too complicated, and even now, it hadn't fully grasped their thoughts. It would rather figure out how to pry open someone's storage cabinet like that Miantuan chameleon. While Hui Mao was thinking hard, the girl carefully walked out of the building and exclaimed, "Ah, a puppy." Hui's followed the little girl's gaze and looked towards the direction she was looking at. There was a small pet dog that had been shot in its body lying next to the building. It had lost all mobility due to the virus infection and the gunshot wound, and all it could do was lay there panting with difficulty. It looked like it wouldn't last much longer, but its eyes were still open and staring at the people inside the building. Some people say that a dog's eyes are the most capable of arousing people's sympathy. This dog was one of them. Although its fur was covered in blood, dust, and the stripes caused by the zebra virus, it no longer looked the same as before. However, its eyes, reflecting the light from the burning objects on the street, still made people's hearts tremble. There was no hatred, no jealousy, and no madness common to humans. Even though it had been shot by a human, its eyes were still pure. It was this kind of gaze that made the two people who walked out of the building stop in their tracks. The little girl looked around, and when she didn't see the people with guns, she quickly walked over and carried the puppy in. Hui Mao, who was squatting behind the cabinet, shook his beard. It seemed that he had an idea. Meow, a low, thin meow sounded. The two people inside the building could still hear it, but it was difficult for the people outside the building to hear it, so they didn't have to worry about being discovered by the people outside. The two people who were pitying the pet dog heard the meow and looked toward the cabinet. With the light from the fire outside the building, they saw a kitten that was half the length of an arm. Its ears were drooping, its tail was drooping, and its body was close to the ground, as if it was difficult to take another step. Its eyes were filled with endless sadness. Meow. It was another weak meow like a mosquito. It was really sad to hear it, and it made people cry. It's a kitten. The little girl walked toward Hui Mao with the pet dog in her arms. She squatted down and looked at the kitten that was crawling over. Hui Mao walked to the side of the little girl who was squatting down, tilted his head, and rubbed along the little girl's outstretched hand. The soft touch made the little girl's heart soften all of a sudden. "Sister, can I take them down?" The little girl looked at the other person. After thinking about it, the woman was also affected by such a cat and dog, especially the cat's eyes that were filled with strong expectation and sadness. Her eyes became hot, and she nodded. Originally, they came out to find some useful items, especially food, under the cover of the night. They didn't expect to meet these two animals. "Bring them in first," the woman said. If these two animals were left here, they might be shot into sieves by those extremists at any time. Okay. The little girl hugged the little pet dog in her arms and freed her hand to carry Hui Mao. "Let me do it," the woman said as she came over, intending to carry Hui Mao into the basement. But before she could touch it, Hui Mao bit the little girl's trouser leg and pulled it to the side. Children's empathy was the strongest, so they had to start from the young. Adults had too many thoughts, and the matter would probably be ruined if they pondered over it. Hui Mao understood this point. "Sister, what is it going to do?" The little girl looked at the woman and asked. The woman looked for a while and said tentatively, "Is it taking us somewhere?" Hui Mao meowed to express its understanding. The little girl looked at Hui Mao and asked, "Where are you taking us?" Hui Mao bit the little girl's trouser leg again and pulled it to the side. "So annoying, should I say something?" After hesitating for a while, the woman touched the little girl's head. "You carry the puppy in first, I'll take the kitten to see what's going on." The little girl shook her head. "I'll wait for you here." "Be good, go down, it's too dangerous here." Seeing that her sister was so determined, the little girl pursed her lips and carried the puppy into the basement. "Sister, be careful." "I know, go in quickly." After the stone door was closed, the woman squatted down and touched the soft-looking Hui Mao's head, and asked softly, "Kitten, where are you taking me?" Seeing that the woman had decided to follow, Hui Mao was so happy that he forgot his manners, turned around, and ran out quickly. The woman was speechless. "Where's your softness?" Seeing that the woman didn't follow, Hui Mao turned his head and looked over in confusion. Seeing the surprise in the woman's eyes, he came back to his senses and knew that he had gone too far, so he walked over and rubbed against the woman's hand, hooked his tail around the woman's wrist, and pulled her in one direction. Although he was too surprised by the cat's two completely different behaviors, he also admired the cat's intelligence. But just to be on the safe side, she touched the gun at her waist and the knife in her sleeves. After confirming that they were safe, she looked at Wheeze and said, "I'll let you go for now, but you better not lead me to the rioters." Hui Mao shook his head hard. Seeing that Hui Mao was looking at her nervously, the woman asked again, "Is your friend or master injured?" Hui Mao nodded again. Standing up, the woman smiled and said, "Take me there, but I'm not sure if I'll let him into the basement." Meow, Hui Mao took the woman to Silen's side. It wasn't a long distance, but the woman found that the cat was really too smart, and even good at hiding. She didn't notice that someone was coming, but the cat found out in advance, lowered its ears, and hid behind the ruins, and even used its tail to signal that someone was coming. After the man with the gun walked past, the cat continued to lead the way. Finally, the woman was taken to Silen's side. After checking Silen's injuries, the woman confirmed that the external injuries weren't serious, and he would be fine after some simple treatment to stop the bleeding. The woman took Silen to the basement. The little girl was happy to see that her sister came back safely, but she was shocked by Hui Mao, who was jumping up and down. After listening to her sister's explanation, the little girl kept praising Hui Mao for being smart. But the cat didn't care about the praise anymore. It was paying attention to Silen's body condition. His vital signs were a bit messed up. How impatient. There were some simple hospital beds in the basement that were pieced together from different items, but it was better than nothing. While treating Silen, the woman noticed that the wounds on Silen's body weren't deep, and they didn't look serious, but they just couldn't stop the bleeding. Strange, all the other basic tests were normal, so why couldn't he stop the bleeding? While Hui Mao was pacing around the dark basement anxiously, Guan Feng had contacted Black Viper's men to search for Silen. They couldn't detect Silen's spaceplane from afar, so they could only send robots to search for him. No one paid attention to the situation here, and the people next to them were also asleep. The equipment beside them had flickered a few times, but it did not attract anyone's attention. Perhaps everyone thought that these equipment were the after effects of the previous chaos. Hui Mao looked at Silen again. He raised his claws and lifted Silen's sleeve. The stripes on his arm were the same. Although the blood from the wound had not coagulated, it was no longer flowing. Half an hour later, Hui Mao blew away the layer of ash on the surface of Silen's body due to the death of a large number of cells. The chaotic state in Silen's body had calmed down, but the originally blurry black and white stripes now appeared again, and the boundary between the two stripes was still so clear. What's going on? Hui Mao listened carefully to Silen's heartbeat and relaxed a little. He continued to lie on the ground and keep watch. Another hour passed. The sky outside was starting to brighten, but the basement was still quiet. Silen opened his eyes and turned his head to see a pair of cat eyes staring at him. He moved his fingers a little uncontrollably, but he recovered very quickly. He raised a hand and pinched Hui Mao's ear, communicating with a machine language that only the two of them knew and no one else could hear. "Where are we?" Silen asked. Hui Mao told him what had happened earlier, and hurriedly asked about Silen's current condition. He also asked if he should contact Guan Feng and have them send someone over. Silen shook his head. After relaxing his muscles, he propped himself up on the makeshift bed and sat up. With his eyesight, he could see the place very clearly. A few people who hadn't fallen asleep vaguely saw that Silen didn't react at all when he sat up. In their minds, even if an infected person could sit up right now, he would die very soon. It wasn't surprising at all. Not far away, Silen saw the dog lying on a small operating table. The dog's gunshot wound had been treated, but it could only lie there. Even breathing was difficult for it. There was a glass of water on the cabinet next to him. Scylla poured himself a glass of water and drank it. Then, he found a bag of compressed biscuits. Although the workmanship was rough, it could still save him a little. In order to get rid of the unknown substance, Scylla felt like he had lost a month's worth of weight in a short period of time. Originally, Scylla had planned to treat the unknown substance gently, decompose it step by step, and then eliminate it. Who knew that he would seize an opportunity in the end? After the unknown substance was decomposed, it became a balancing force that stabilized the chip, and embedded itself into the biochip on the DNA chromosome, causing the chip to change. What made Scylla happy was that during this embedding process, the chip was completely activated. Under the effect of the decomposed unknown substance, it was unusually peaceful. In other words, Scylla had absorbed the substance that produced the zebra virus for his own use. It was exactly because of this that Scylla was able to better understand this new virus. Most of the time, naturally formed life forms were much stronger than artificially modified ones. The same was true for viruses. In fact, the most dangerous viruses weren't the viruses in the secret research institutes, but the unknown viruses that hadn't been discovered yet. This virus was definitely not artificially created. It was a new life form, a new virus. It didn't appear in the form of DNA or protein like other known viruses, but in the form of this unknown substance. The unknown substance that entered Scylla's body allowed the zebra virus to appear. Now, without this substance, the zebra virus would no longer appear. As for the so-called mutants, Scylla could analyze the interaction between the chip in his body and the unknown substance to find the best solution. Taking advantage of this time, Scylla looked at the contents recorded by the scanning machine in the underground laboratory where the substance was discovered. The whole story of the discovery of the substance and the origin of the zebra virus were recorded. He was a depressed researcher. He had only accidentally discovered the material that fell from the meteorite and brought it into the laboratory. However, it didn't take long for him to discover that he was infected with the virus. After discovering it, the person didn't immediately report it. Instead, he set up a trap with a hateful thought. The people who died on the planet discovered by the patrol team were the victims. Through the records, Scylla knew that the researcher contacted 7 people. In other words, in addition to the 5 people who had been discovered, there were 2 more people. These 7 people were the carriers that spread the virus from one planet to another. This was a revenge incident. "Hey, you're awake," the woman who brought Scylla over said. Scylla put away the scanner without a trace and smiled. "Thank you for bringing me in." "Don't thank me. If you want to thank someone, thank your cat. We really couldn't help much." The woman looked at Scylla and found that the small wounds had healed, and even the marks had faded. However, she didn't ask directly. She had seen many people with special physiques. Scylla walked a few steps and stretched. If it weren't for the stripes on his face, people would think that he was a normal person who hadn't been infected with the zebra virus. "Anyway, thank you for bringing me here." The woman smiled bitterly. "This is all I can do. I know that everyone is going to die, but I still want to do something out of habit. Come, I'll take you to eat some hot food." There was a small compartment in the basement that was used to store hot food. Here, the woman scooped a bowl of porridge for Scylla. This was the only simple food in the basement. Scylla drank a large bowl. Although it wasn't much, he still felt hungry. However, he realized that there wasn't much food in the basement, so he didn't ask the woman to make more after he ate some. It was already dawn outside, but no one dared to go out. They were afraid that they would be beaten into a sieve. Hui Mao was also very hungry, but it was picky and didn't eat this kind of porridge. Scylla pinched its ears and told it that he would make food for it after they went out. While they were resting in the cubicle, Celine chatted with the woman for a bit. He learned that the woman was a doctor, and the school she went to was not a good one. Her family's financial situation was limited, and she did not have any particularly outstanding talents. She had always been unknown. However, it was precisely this ordinary and inconspicuous doctor who still carried the word, medical ethics, in such a difficult situation. What about those so-called celebrities in the industry? This disaster had taken away many people, including her family. Now, only she and her cousin, the little girl that Huimao pretended to be pitiful, were left. It will be fine. There will be a turn for the better soon, Silin said. The woman just smiled and didn't answer. They had been looking forward to the so-called turn for the better for too long, but the final result was always disappointing. Now, she was numb with disappointment. She only relied on the remaining medical ethics to support herself. She didn't give up. She was motivated to keep those people alive for one more second. Of course, she wasn't stupid. She had her own standards. There were some people she didn't dare to bring in. She didn't trust them. If this place was exposed, everyone here would die. After talking for a while, Silin took out a tube of medicine. It was a broad-spectrum medicine that he had made in the past. Although it couldn't completely cure the symptoms of the zebra virus, it could play a role in alleviating it. Try this medicine. There's hope if you can delay it for one more second. The woman took the medicine and thanked him. She didn't doubt the medicine. After all, at a time like this, it didn't matter what medicine it was. She would give it a try if she could. When the woman heard that Silin wanted to go out, she gave Silin a gun. Silin refused. The gun would be more useful in their hands. After Silin promised not to tell the rioters about this place, the woman opened the basement door for Silin and let Silin out. It was still gray outside, and the air was filled with an unpleasant smell. There were some people sitting on the rubble with guns. They were the kind of people who chose to go crazy in their despair. Silin and Huimao didn't choose to clash with them. Now wasn't the time. Their top priority right now was to contact Guanfeng. After leaving the city and arriving at a remote place, Silin took out his communicator and contacted Guanfeng. It didn't take long for the communicator to connect. Guanfeng stared at Silin's black and white face through the holographic image on the communicator's screen. He opened his mouth a few times, but couldn't utter a single word for a very long time. While Guanfeng was silent, Silin told him his idea. He wanted to research the zebra virus medicine here, and he asked Guanfeng to send a robot to deliver the medicine synthesizer. Guanfeng refused. Some robots have already arrived at the planet, but they couldn't find you. Since you've come out now, I'll have them send you off the planet. I won't object to your research. The starship I sent out should have arrived outside the planet by now, and there are relevant equipment on it. You can research there, but you can't stay on the planet. Silin understood Guanfeng's meaning. A heavily infected planet like this could be abandoned at any time. If the higher-ups gave the order, Silin would be able to avoid them easily if he stayed on the starship. Silin didn't turn down Guanfeng's offer. He needed to hurry up and try to synthesize the medicine. Robots appeared around Silin before Silin could finish talking to Guanfeng. They had received the signal and rushed over. A hidden spaceplane was already flying over. After turning off the communicator, Silin and Huimao went up to the starship. There was indeed a starship waiting outside the planet, but it wasn't Guanfeng's. It looked like Black Viper's starship. There was no way Guanfeng's starship would have such a complete set of medicine synthesizer equipment. Without contacting anyone else, Silin went straight into the medicine workshop and started trying to synthesize the virus medicine. Huimao crouched on a nearby shelf and asked Silin during a break, "You look pretty good right now. If it wasn't for that zebra stripe on your face, I wouldn't have thought that you're an infected person at all." Silin moved his gaze away from the molecular synthesizer and smiled. You can't judge a book by its cover. Under Huimao's wide, round eyes, the black and white zebra stripes on Silin's body started fading until they disappeared completely. Then, they reappeared and returned to their original black and white appearance. Huimao raised a paw in indignation. Why you're lying again? It can't be helped. At first, I became like that because of the infection, but after I woke up, I was no longer like that. Besides, if others find out about this, do you want me to be dragged into research by the Royal Academy of Sciences or the bigots of Black Viper? Hui Mao shook his head violently. Who would be willing to do something like that? In the past, it was afraid of being dragged into research, but now Sillin was in the same situation as well. Very good, I have a companion. So you're saying that you're completely fine now? Hui Mao wagged his tail happily. You could say that. That's good then. You should get back to work. I'm going to sleep now that I'm full. Go to sleep. Sillin rubbed Hui Mao's head. It must have been hard on the glutton this time. Now that he finally had a chance to relax, he decided to let it have a good sleep. Half a day later, Sillin chose 3 different medicines from the dozen or so he tested them on infected animals. All of them were fairly effective. He chose the quickest medicine and had the robot take it to some of the heavily infected animals on the planet. If it worked, then it would be a success. After the robot left with the medicine, Sillin had just sat down when his communicator rang. It wasn't Guan Feng this time, but a dispirited bell. Chapter 301. I've finally gotten in touch with you. How did you end up like this? Bell had dark circles under his eyes. He looked lethargic, probably because he'd been crying. His eyes were swollen, and his beard was unkempt. But when he saw the stripes on Sillin's face, he fell silent before he could finish. It's fine, don't worry about me. Just tell me what you need, Sillin said. Although Bell, the prince of the Firehawk royal family, could be quite unreliable at times, he had never been this dejected before. I'm fine. Sillin, how did you get the zebra virus too? Where are you right now? Are you receiving treatment? I'm in the 11th star region. Bell was speechless. That was a heavily infected star region, one that could be completely abandoned. A moment of silence later, Bell asked, did you talk about the zebra virus at Cousin Gaga's wedding? It was obvious that Bell already knew the symptoms of the virus. He asked, are there infected people outside the 11th star region as well? Yes. Bell rubbed his forehead. The dark circles under his eyes were particularly obvious. Bell explained the situation. His mother had been feeling unwell on her way back from a visit, and zebra stripes had started appearing on her skin. Over 80% of the people she'd brought with her were affected. The rest were being tested for the incubation period, and those that couldn't be released were kept in quarantine. The Fire Eagle Queen had only gone out to visit her family because she was bored. The Fire Eagle King, Bell, and the others hadn't been allowed to go with her. After receiving the news from the steward, the Fire Eagle royal family panicked, the Royal Academy of Sciences panicked, and the news began to leak out of the empire. Everyone began to reject anyone from the 11th star region. At the same time, everyone felt insecure. No matter what the government said, they didn't believe it. There were rumors that the disease was incurable, and those who were unfortunate enough to contract it could only wait for death. How's your mother doing? Sillin asked. Bell shook his head. It's not good. She's in the isolation ward right now, and we can't get in touch with her at all. We can only communicate with her through communicators and video feeds, but if we talk to her for too long, she'll show signs of fatigue. Bell sighed. The Royal Academy of Sciences potions can only serve as a buffer. They say they can solve the problem if they can find the source of the zebra virus, but they're using all the resources of the Firehawk royal family to search for the source of the zebra virus. The 2 armies of the Empire are also searching for it, but they haven't made any progress yet. Sillin, you. Bell hesitated for a moment. After all, Sillin was also infected. He couldn't be too negative in front of a patient. It's okay. Just ask me if you have any questions, Sillin said. Bell took a deep breath when he saw that Scylla really didn't seem to care about the current situation. The main reason I'm contacting you is to ask about the actual situation of this virus. You're more knowledgeable in this field than I am, and I don't believe the words of those people. Tell me, is there really no other way? I need time. Scylla didn't tell Bell about his research. He hadn't gotten the final result yet, so he couldn't promise too much before he could confirm it. Time. Bell covered his face with a grimace. I know we need time, but it's uncomfortable here. It's really uncomfortable. Bell tapped his chest heavily on his chest. Bell used to be a man who never left his room, but now he spent almost all of his time outside the quarantine room. She'll recover soon. It shouldn't take too long. Now, use any medicine that can act as a buffer to buy some time for your mother to hold on. Don't give up on herself. If she gives up on herself, even if the medicine is made, I'm afraid it'll be very dangerous. It's really not long. It won't take long. Bell's eyes were red as if he had grabbed onto his last lifeline. In fact, he thought that Scylla was just comforting himself. It's the truth. Don't tell anyone about me yet, especially the Jen family. Just wait for the news. There should be a solution very soon. After a pause, Scylla said, I promise. Scylla adjusted the angle of the communicator and pointed it at Huimao, who was curled into a ball and snoring away. Look, this cat is sleeping pretty soundly. Does it look like it's worried? Not at all. Bell was truly envious of Huimao's ability to sleep so soundly. He didn't even dare to close his eyes. If he did, he'd feel like he'd never see the people he was familiar with again. He forced himself to look at them as best he could. Scylla, does Teacher Guan know about your situation? If you need protection, don't hesitate. I'll be able to help. Thanks, but it's fine. I just talked to him, so don't worry about me being stubborn. Take care of yourself. If, and I mean if, things get really bad, contact us more often. Don't worry, everything will be fine. Really? After ending the call with Bell, Scylla closed his eyes and fell into deep thought. The source of the Fire Eagle consort's zebra virus infection should be the two people who escaped. These two people were active carriers of the virus, spreading the virus, and then the infected people continued to spread it, spreading it more widely and infecting more people. Scylla had already sent the information about the two people to Guanfeng. Guanfeng had already arranged for his men to capture the two virus carriers and take control of the areas they had been to. Of course, that was, if they were still alive. Scylla also gave some information about the zebra virus to Guanfeng. He was in charge of leaking the information to Black Viper and the RAS. It would be a good thing if they could find a better way to cure the zebra virus. However, although Celine had listed a lot of information about the zebra virus pathogen, he did not mention the unknown substance that he had absorbed into his body. Just like the chip in his body, it was a secret he had to keep. If it weren't for this discovery, there probably wouldn't be a viable cure for the zebra virus in the short term. Even if an effective medicine could be made in the end, it would cost the lives of countless people and the destruction of many planets. The robot who brought the drug to the planet to search for seriously ill patients to conduct drug experiments finally sent back a message. Looking at the data and the patient's reaction after being injected with the drug, Scylla combined the data and modified the original drug so that it would be more effective on the human body. There were more than 50 people who were injected with the first-generation medicine. They were all severely infected and immobile, and many of them were on the verge of death. 41 people showed signs of improvement after the injection. 6 out of the remaining 9 were more resistant to the medicine because of their constitution, so the medicine wasn't very effective. He would have to wait and see. The remaining 3 people died not long after the injection. It wasn't because the medicine didn't work, but because they were all physically weak. For example, the elderly or those who had been in a suboptimal state all year round. Their bodies were too fragile, and they were already critically ill. They passed away before the medicine could save them. It was good that it was effective. The modified medicine would be injected into the people on the planet in large batches, but the process would take some time. In order to save as many critically ill people as possible, Silen sent the molecular formula and other information of the first-generation medicine to Guanfeng to save the severely infected beyond the 11th star region. It was only limited to the severely infected people. Silen still needed to make some improvements to the medicine, and they would receive better and safer medicine in the end. After Guanfeng received the information about Silen's medicine, he found a person he was on good terms with from the RAS to synthesize the medicine. Although this person wasn't a high-ranking executive, his academic attainment was no less than theirs. He had the right to compete for the position, but he wanted to spend more time on his own research. This was the difference between him and the people who were still sitting in the meeting room. The information on the synthesis of the potion was quickly transmitted to the various people in charge. Now, there were voices of protest and distrust everywhere in the empire. It was filled with anger, despair, and curses. After the people in charge of the various places injected the first-generation potion into those who were in critical condition, a large number of them survived. The stripes on their bodies also showed obvious signs of fading, and their vital signs gradually became stronger. The people who were panicking because of the zebra virus finally calmed down a lot, but the panic caused by the virus hadn't dissipated yet. They still wanted nothing more than to find a safe shell to hide themselves in. Right now, Guanfeng's fame in the affiliated schools was even greater than the other executives. It was because Guanfeng had already received the first-generation cure for the zebra virus while they were still holding emergency meetings in the conference room. Not long ago, there were people who accused Guanfeng of leaving the emergency meeting for no reason, ignoring the safety of the empire's citizens, and ignoring the lives of important people. But now, Guanfeng's actions were undoubtedly a heavy slap to the face. However, Guanfeng didn't take all the credit. He released a statement through the official media and explained that it was all his student Silen's work. Moreover, Silen was also infected by the zebra virus, and he had spent all his time and energy on research even though he was infected. Therefore, he, Guanfeng, would like to pay tribute to everyone who worked tirelessly and even when they were sick. The statement caused a lot of noise, but some of the executives of the RAS looked like shit all day long. They also locked themselves in their labs, claiming that they were doing research. No one knew what was really going on, and they didn't care either. Right now, everyone's attention was on Silen, and they were most concerned about when the second-generation medicine would come out. Although Guanfeng had pushed all of the credit to Silen, his status as a famous mentor of his own school and a famous academician of the Royal Academy of Sciences had been elevated even higher. There were a lot of people who hoped to receive Guanfeng's guidance in the future, and everyone knew that Guanfeng's students were either important people or people who could contribute a lot to the empire like Silen. Who wouldn't be envious when they became famous? Bell had learned about the first-generation medicine as well. His eyes were practically brimming with tears when he heard that the first-generation medicine had come out, and he immediately told his mother a lot of things through the quarantine room's communicator. He was so excited that he took a little too long to talk, so his father pinched his ear and ordered him to go back to sleep. After all, everyone had been guarding the quarantine room until now, and no one had slept a wink. They were afraid that the quarantine room would be gone by the time they opened their eyes again. After receiving the good news that the first-generation medicine was a great success, the Fire Eagle King sent Bell and the others back to rest. Everyone needed rest too much, and if they continued like this, a bunch of people outside the quarantine room would collapse before the people inside had even died. At the 11th star region, the so-called special department personnel such as Gu Xian and Tu Ba were cooperating with Silen's operation. Christy Hadar and the Emperor of the Mist Bodhisattva Empire had ordered them to cooperate with Silen's operation as much as they could. Silen had the highest authority to command all department personnel stationed at the 11th star region, and he had also sent out a portion of the military to start treating the 11th star region. The special department was in the open, and the robots were in the dark. At the same time, the military and government personnel of every planet were forced to cooperate. Those who didn't would be punished by the department personnel. What else do you want at a time like this? Profit? Fuck off. Sillin sent someone to the basement where the second batch of medicine was being tested. He injected the second-generation medicine into both the critically ill person and the dog inside. The planet was already under the control of the newly dispatched army. The messy streets were being cleaned up by large cleanup machines, and the extremists who had gone too far had been killed. Maybe they weren't like this because of the virus. The chaos caused by the virus was nothing more than a fuse for them to vent their bloodlust. The second-generation medicine was a lot more successful than the first. Black Viper had also developed a couple of medicines based on the information Sillin had provided and the results of the first-generation medicine. However, Sillin's second-generation medicine was slightly better than the first. Sillin wasn't satisfied with the second-generation medicine's success. It was because the second-generation medicine still had a flaw, but Sillin didn't know how to fix it in the short term. That was why he summoned some people from Black Viper's research department as one of Black Viper's 3 leaders, including Neo, who was stubbornly refusing to inject himself with the medicine he had developed. There were a lot of people who were in the same situation as Neo. Although they weren't critically ill, their thoughts and attitude made them look like idiots to most people. The second-generation medicine had been handed out, and many places in the Empire with infected people switched to using it. Everyone was much more confident when they saw the results. The government used the second-generation medicine's momentum to spread encouragement and attack those who spread rumors. Sillin didn't pay attention to any of this. He gathered some people from Black Viper to discuss and improve the second-generation medicine's flaws. Sillin had his own way of dealing with these paranoid research maniacs. Soon, everyone, including Neo, was discussing the second-generation medicine through their communicators. This was a summit without any RAS personnel. Later on, it became known as the Zebra Summit. The public's understanding of the summit was limited. Some people speculated that Sillin had gathered a lot of hidden geniuses to participate in this meeting, and most of these mysterious folk experts were infected with the Zebra virus. That was why a lot of people went to the 11th star region to search for the real person after the conference. Many versions of the Zebra Summit experts had appeared, but Sillin couldn't help but feel helpless. That being said, he had to admit that there were a lot of scholars who had been buried for a long time because of this event. Of course, this was a story for another time, so let's not talk about it for now. Speaking of which, the people of Black Viper shared their thoughts as if they had found a common voice when Sillin gathered them together for the seminar. In their opinion, the Empire was filled with humans who weren't of their own race and had the intelligence of chimpanzees. Their IQ wasn't on the same level, so of course they wouldn't say anything if they didn't agree. That was why they were a lot more relaxed now that they had found their own kind. The discussion at the conference was intense, and it was all professional knowledge. Even some people in this field might not be able to understand it. In Tu Ba's words, it was so profound that it made one's hair stand on end. This was the deep understanding of a soldier. Soldiers could understand the use of various machines, could understand the analysis of many kinds of codes, and could understand signal dissection. However, things like virus research were like listening to a book from heaven to them. They weren't in the same plane. After the conference, the third-generation medicine was finally produced. This was the perfect medicine in everyone's heart. Even those with weak constitutions or those with strong rejection could use it without any side effects. The Firehawk concubine's condition quickly improved after using this medicine. With the popularization of the third-generation medicine, everyone knew the name, Sillin, and the Zebra Summit that produced the third-generation medicine. Sillin didn't take all the credit, but the people from Black Viper couldn't be made public, so they hid their key information. Sillin looked at the planet being repaired through the paintings on the starship. From space, the planet was no longer filled with flames, nor was it covered in haze. The small city that Sillin had stayed in was also gradually recovering. The sky had become clear. One could see the white and clean clouds after the end of the chaotic world. The blue sky made people want to sink into such clarity. Although it hadn't been too long since the outbreak of the virus, it was only a few dozen days. But after that, it might be a few years, a few decades, or even until they grew old. The people on this planet wouldn't forget this gray memory. The woman in the basement was also standing outside. She didn't bring out a stool and just sat on the ground while leaning against the building. Beside her, the little girl was hugging the pet dog that survived and basking in the sun on the street that had been cleaned up. There were some children running on the street. There were still some streaks on their faces that hadn't completely faded, but their bodily functions were already recovering. Soon, they would be able to run and jump to their heart's content. After this, people treasured this God-given mobility even more. The joy of escaping from death's door wasn't very intense. There were no cheers or crazy shouts. Everyone just smiled faintly as they looked at the children who had survived the disaster running on the street. The city that was riddled with holes under the sun was no longer the same as in their memories. However, this kind of city that was coated with a layer of golden light made people tear up uncontrollably. Everything would be better. Chapter 302. The panic brought about by the zebra virus finally subsided. From the time the virus spread to the time when the drug was developed and the disease was brought under control, it did not take long, but it left a deep impression on many people. Be it the government officials who were as busy as a spinning top, the researchers who were infected during their research, or the people on the planet who were severely infected and almost wiped out, it felt like centuries of suffering. Silen dropped his disguise after the third-generation medicine appeared. The black and white stripes on his body faded, and after learning that the Firehawk Queen and Black Viper's stubborn people were safe and sound, Silen and Huimao left the 11th star region with Huimao. Everything had been arranged, so he didn't need to stay and supervise anymore. On the planet Silen once led, the woman and her younger sister began to rebuild their home together. The pet dog that had been saved was now able to run freely. It walked around the two of them, and from time to time, it would pick up a construction material and deliver it to them. It wagged its tail happily and looked very energetic. It wasn't just humans. Even animals seemed to have become a lot more enlightened after the disaster. During this time, the infected people who were brought into the basement came to thank the woman one after another. Those who could afford to leave the planet were planning to migrate to other planets where they had relatives to help them. They didn't want to stay on this planet that had given them gray memories any longer. Before they left, they asked for the woman's opinion. If she was willing, they would help her leave. But the woman refused. Her home was here, and she would rebuild it with her own hands even if it was destroyed. While they were busy, a rescue robot sent by the Empire delivered a notice to them. It was a notice from the best medical school in the 11th star region. It was one of the top 10 medical schools in the entire Mist Bodhisattva Empire. Moreover, the notice stated that tuition is free, and family members were allowed to come with them. Medical schools were all about qualifications, and the woman's future was guaranteed to be bright after she went to this school. Everyone looked at the woman enviously. They were all wondering what kind of background she had to have received this notice. Everyone knew that to enter such a good school, one had to have extraordinary qualifications or a strong background. Women were not people with extraordinary qualifications. If that was the case, they would not be where they were now, staying on this small planet that was not developing well. So she had a background. But if they had any background, they would have been sent out like the people from the planetary government. Before the emergence of the virus potion, the woman was also in a very difficult situation, almost like everyone else waiting for death. It was not right to say that she had a background. The woman pulled out the notice. There was a note under the notice. I said it would be fine. Thank you for your help, and please keep the faith in your heart. There was no signature, but the woman already knew who it was. Besides, there was a cat's paw print on the back of the note. If the person with the cat had such a strong background, why would he stay on this small planet that was almost abandoned at such a critical time? The woman couldn't understand. What the woman didn't understand was that the person with the cat was currently on his way back to the Empire's star sector. As long as the signal reception was normal, Silen would have to face many people's questions and reprimands, such as Genya. Genya was very angry, very angry. If he hadn't seen the media report, he still wouldn't have known that Silen had been infected with the zebra virus. This little bastard actually went to the 11th star region that everyone avoided. More importantly, he didn't even tell him that he had been infected. If there really was an accident. Genya didn't dare think about it. His brothers Zhen Liao and Silen were the two people he valued the most in the empire. He didn't want any accidents to happen to either of them. Because of this, the usually gentle Genya gave Guanfeng a good scolding. Zhen Liao was drinking tea at the side, and Guanfeng was quite amused to see the sullen look on Genya's face. Therefore, not only did Silen have to endure Genya's scolding, but he also had to endure Guanfeng's scolding as well. This time, Guanfeng was seriously scared out of his wits, or he wouldn't have slammed the table in the RAS conference room without any scruples. However, Guanfeng also brought a piece of news after Genya and Zhen Liao's scolding. Silen had been invited by the RAS. Therefore, when Silen returned to the capital star region to visit Genya at the Zhen family and arrived at the affiliated school, Silen received an invitation from the RAS. The RAS's invitation basically meant one thing: Silen will be accepted into the RAS as an exception. Why was it an exception? According to the RAS's standards, one needed qualifications, great research contributions, and a smooth graduation. If one couldn't even graduate, the RAS wouldn't accept them easily. Therefore, many people were shocked when they heard that Silen had received an invitation from the RAS while he was still at AFI. But when they thought about Silen's great contributions this time, it was understandable that he would receive an invitation like this. However, there was a small argument during the invitation process. Silen's outstanding contributions to the zebra virus incident should have been awarded the title of Honorary Scholar of the Institute of Virology. However, some people objected the moment the question was raised. After all, Silen was Guanfeng's student, and Guanfeng wasn't a virologist. Silen's acceptance should have taken Guanfeng's situation into consideration. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good. It was true that a non-virologist mentor had taught a virologist student. That would have created a bad impression. However, when they asked Guanfeng about it, he didn't really care. Who said he couldn't teach a virologist student when he was practically illiterate about viruses? Plus, what Guanfeng cared about the most wasn't which department Silen would end up in, but whether he could enter the RAS or not. How could the great leader of Black Viper's academic department not be qualified to enter the RAS? Guanfeng didn't expect this day to come so soon. How gratifying. Since his mentor had agreed, it wasn't appropriate for anyone else to voice their opinions. Since his mentor had expressed his opinion, it meant that he would shoulder all responsibility for the future. Therefore, Silen was awarded the title of Honorary Scholar of the RAS's Institute of Virology on the day he entered the RAS. Becoming an honorary scholar was just a part of the process. As long as Silen didn't step out of line too much during this period of time, it was only a matter of time before he became an academician. From an outsider's point of view, Silen's backer was Guanfeng, and no one in the RAS could disrespect Guanfeng just like that. Right now, Guanfeng's popularity in the empire was so great that he was practically a role model for all teachers. Of course, the higher-ups of the RAS wouldn't do anything stupid. Even if Guanfeng's behavior in the meeting room was embarrassing, it was still a special time. They couldn't use normal standards to judge people during special times. Therefore, not only could they not give Silen and Guanfeng a hard time, they had to greet them with a smile. Now that he had accepted the title and officially entered the RAS, it was time to follow the RAS's standards. Those who had their own ideas could apply for projects and funding, and those who didn't or those who had similar projects to the other academicians could apply to join the big project. After all, a big project like this would bring great benefits to everyone involved. Be it the academic glory or the money they would earn at the end of the project, they were all things that outsiders would be jealous of. Of course, you could also choose not to apply for or participate in any projects, but that would mean you wouldn't have wealth or a higher reputation. Generally speaking, newcomers to the Royal Academy of Sciences would apply for projects or recommend themselves to academicians with big projects in order to get a place in the academy. But Silen didn't choose either. He didn't have a big project yet, and he didn't want to join one either. Plus, he was still a student at AF1, and he had to complete the basic tasks Guan Feng had assigned him. He also had to deal with some unexpected incidents at Black Viper's place. People like Neo would always start conflicts of one kind or another, and they wouldn't settle them with violence. Instead, they would settle them with the results of their research. If they didn't control it well, another incident like the zebra virus might happen again. After all, artificial viruses could cause a lot of harm. Therefore, Silen didn't have the time to care about the RAS's projects at all. Even though Silen wasn't participating in the projects, there were some things he had to do. Even Guan Feng couldn't say anything about it. That was, he had to send them to famous academies in different star regions to give presentations. Of course, it was left to the honorary scholars. How could the academicians have the time to travel all over the star regions to give presentations? Everyone was busy with their own things, and they were supervising their subordinates' projects. Usually, the honorary scholars under their projects would be the ones doing the presentations. These honorary scholars were labeled as academicians, so they would be mentioned many times during the presentations. Not only did this save time, but it also spread the influence of the Royal Academy of Sciences. It also allowed the academicians of the Royal Academy of Sciences to maintain a sense of mystery. This time, it was Guan Feng's turn to give a presentation. However, Guan Feng preferred to complete his own projects on his own, so he never allowed the honorary scholars to participate. Moreover, Guan Feng was always busy, and he was a member of the management. Therefore, every time it was Guan Feng's turn, he would skip it and let the next academician take over. Many people always complained about this, and it just so happened that Silen's appearance this time meant that Guan Feng couldn't escape. Although Silen and Guan Feng didn't belong to the same department, they were still teacher and student. If a teacher wanted to give a presentation, his student could do it for him. There were a lot of people in the RAS who didn't get along with him in the first place, so Guan Feng couldn't refuse this time. Therefore, he called Silen over and gave him this honorable but difficult task. Guan Feng pointed at some of the school introductions flashing on the screen and said to Silen, "These are all schools that need a presentation outside of the time limit. Choose one of them. You don't have many classes right now anyway, and I don't have much to do here. This is the only thing you need to do. If you complete it, I'll give you bonus points and guarantee that you'll receive a huge scholarship from the affiliated schools this year." Silen shot Guan Feng a sideways glance before walking up to the screen and flipping through it. Silen's hands suddenly paused. "This one then." Guan Feng looked at the school information on the screen and came to a sudden realization. "Oh, this one then. I'll give you the relevant documents, and all you need to do is wear the RAS Honorary Scholar emblem. The people over there will welcome you on their own." Silen chose a school in the 23rd star region. Silen thought that he might as well pay Old Chang and the others a visit since he was only doing a report. When he returned to the dormitory, Silen was packing his things. Hui Mao was crouching on top of a cabinet, rolling left and right instead of helping. Moreover, he was still within Silen's field of vision. Silen closed the bag and looked at Hui Mao. "Speak. What do you need?" Seeing that Silen had finally spoken, Hui Mao rolled to his feet and complained, "Silen, didn't you say that you'd find a way to go back after that thing is over?" Silen sighed and picked up Hui Mao to stroke its fur. "I'm going to visit Shikai and ask about Sigma's master before I go to the 23rd star region. I'm sure they'll have a way." "Really? Really? Then let's go now." Hui Mao jumped over to the storage cabinet and started grabbing things. They were all his favorite food, and he had to bring them with him when he went on a long journey. Silen didn't have much to pack. The main thing he needed to do was bring some relevant documents and a trustworthy ID. It would be a waste of time and trouble if someone questioned his identity. Sillin didn't wait for the RAS guards to escort him. He drove Guan Feng's new spaceplane straight away. Guan Feng didn't feel bad about the self-destruction of his previous spaceplane on the heavily infected planet, so he asked the RAS engineering department to build him a new spaceplane. Maybe it was because the previous incident had affected Guan Feng too much, but the spaceplane was equipped with multiple sterilization rooms and some medical equipment. It could be used as a temporary laboratory. It would be a lot more convenient for Sillin if he ran into a similar situation again. Aside from the new equipment, the spaceplane was also equipped with an enhanced AI processing system to prevent another self-destruction. The spaceplane didn't look very big, but it was as expensive as a starship used by some nobles. Moreover, Sillin didn't need to spend a single cent on it. Hui Mao did some calculations on Sillin's shoulder before patting Sillin with its paw. Can we buy more fish biscuits with the money we've saved? Don't you have a lot of them in your cabinet? We can buy some when we see a new flavor. After leaving the capital Star region, Sillin contacted Shikai. As one of the 3 true leaders of Black Viper, Sillin naturally knew how to contact Shikai. Shikai wasn't surprised by Sillin's message. He said, I think I would have gone to you even if you hadn't come looking for me. Let's find a place to talk. Sure, where do you want to go? Shikai sent Sillin a star map with a location marked on it. It wasn't far from Sillin's current location, so it was convenient for Sillin. It was obvious that Shikai had thought about Sillin before. I have a space fortress here. It's my personal property. This meant that Sillin didn't need to worry about it. It was well hidden. Alright, I'll head over right now. He calculated the time and noted that there was still some time before the scheduled report time. It was enough time for Sillin and Shikai to chat. Most of the people on Shikai's space fortress were robots, so Shikai was already waiting for them by the time Sillin and Hui Mao arrived. Neither of them liked to beat around the bush, so Sillin didn't explain his true intentions. He didn't know much about Shikai yet, and the information Black Viper had given him was limited. Guan Feng had told him that he would have to ask the man himself if he wanted to know more about Shikai. Shikai didn't mind either. He told Guan Feng about his family's situation in Black Viper first. Shikai's family had a very special status in Black Viper, or rather, his ancestors had always had a special status in Black Viper. They didn't participate in Black Viper's management, but almost all of them shared power with Black Viper's people. It was because they provided highly intelligent robots, and more than half of the missions that happened in secret or those that the government couldn't interfere with were done by them. However, there had never been any betrayal. Shikai said that his ancestor had signed a contract with the founder of Black Viper, the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor at the time. Black Viper would provide the Shi family with a place to live and the production of robots in exchange for not betraying Black Viper. According to the family's records, that ancestor was a good friend of Sir Freeman. If it wasn't for Sir Freeman, the Shi family and these robots wouldn't exist today. That's why the Shi family abides by the contract and never betrays Black Viper. It's like a program that we can't break. What happened back then? What happened back then? Sillin asked. I'm not sure myself. Many generations of Shi family members have searched for the truth, but to no avail. All we know is that Sir Freeman saved the Shi family, and we cannot betray Black Viper. Even the royal family doesn't know. They don't know. Neither the Mist Bodhisattva Emperor nor Sir Freeman told anyone else. What about Black Viper? Someone tried to find it in the past, but Black Viper didn't have much intelligence back then, and it didn't have any important memories of the Shi family. All it remembers is His Excellency Freeman. As for the others, perhaps they are not important to it. The more Shikai said, the more Hui Mao's ears drooped. It felt like its chances of returning were getting slimmer and slimmer. A moment of silence later, Sillin asked, do you have any sentient robots in your possession? Like. I know what you're talking about, Shikai said before Celine could finish explaining. Rubbing his forehead, Shikai continued, in the history of the Shi family, they have created 5 such robots. Other than their mechanical bodies, they are almost the same as humans. They have their own thoughts, personalities, emotions, and their own views. Later on, we called them the original robots. The original project was something the Shi family had been working on for a long time, but not a single qualified original robot has ever appeared. No one knows how the ancestors of the Shi family created those 5 original robots, and there are no records of it. That's why we've been searching for the truth all this time. Maybe the original method was hidden during that time. Where are the 5 original robots now? What are they called? You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.